Story 1. On the night of my 18th birthday, my father threw my belongings onto the front lawn and handed me an official letter of disownment after I had brought shame to the family name by reporting the uncle who had been essing me since I was 12. As I stood there in the rain, my mother watched silently from behind him while he snarled, "You're a man, you should have kept quiet. So from today, you're no longer part of this family. Forget our name." I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "Don't worry. I'll make sure no one ever forgets it." That was 4 weeks ago. This morning, they found a letter on their doorstep. They haven't stopped calling since. I never thought I'd be the one to destroy my family's legacy. But then again, I never thought my family would throw me away like yesterday's trash either. They haven't stopped calling since this morning. 17 missed calls from my father. 23 from my mother. Even my sister, who hasn't spoken to me in weeks, tried reaching me 9 times. The voicemails pile up, each one more desperate than the last. I listened to none of them. They had their chance to speak. Now it's my turn. 4 weeks ago, I stood in the pouring rain watching my childhood get drenched on our manicured front lawn. Clothes, books, even the model airplanes I'd built with my grandfather, all of it thrown out the door like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. My father stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage, gripping an official-looking document so tightly his knuckles turned white. My mother hovered behind him, her face a blank canvas of complicity. "You've brought shame to this family," he spat, rain speckling his designer shirt as he thrust the paper at me. "This is a formal letter of disownment. As of today, you are no longer a Blackwood." Let me back up. My name was Ethan Blackwood. Son of Richard Blackwood, the celebrated district attorney whose face was plastered across campaign billboards all over the city. The man who built his career prosecuting sex offenders while his own brother preyed on his son under his roof. It started when I was 12. Uncle James moved in after his divorce. He brought expensive gifts and a darkness I couldn't name until much later. By the time I understood what was happening, the pattern was set. The threats were clear. The shame was mine to carry. For 6 years, I carried it. 6 years of carefully orchestrated family dinners where I sat across from my abuser. 6 years of being told how lucky I was to have such an attentive uncle. 6 years of my father proudly declaring at public events that protecting the innocent was the Blackwood family mission. On my 18th birthday, I finally found the courage to speak. I chose that day specifically, legally an adult, finally able to stand on my own if everything went wrong. And everything did go wrong. My father didn't believe me. Or worse, he didn't want to believe me. Do you understand what these accusations would do to my campaign? To our family name? He'd shouted, pacing our pristine living room. When I showed him the evidence, the journal I'd kept, the inappropriate texts I'd saved, his face didn't register shock or sorrow. It registered calculation. Political damage assessment. 3 hours later, I was standing in the rain with that letter in my trembling hands. "You're a man now," my father had snarled from the doorway. "You should have kept quiet and handled this like a man. So from today, you're no longer part of this family. Forget our name." I remember looking him directly in the eyes, the rain mixing with the tears I refused to acknowledge. "Don't worry. I'll make sure no one ever forgets it." This morning, they found my letter on their doorstep. And now, they won't stop calling. The shelter wasn't so bad, all things considered. After the first night of sleeping in my car, a social worker helped me find a place that specifically assisted survivors of abuse. The word survivor still felt strange in my mouth. Like clothing that didn't quite fit yet. "You can stay here for up to 3 months, the intake coordinator explained, showing me to a small but clean room with a twin bed and a desk. "We'll help you find employment, permanent housing, and connect you with support services." I nodded mechanically, still numb from everything that had happened. The coordinator, Diane, her name tag read, seemed to understand. She'd clearly seen the shock before. "When you're ready, we have group sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Individual counseling is available too." She paused, studying my face. "You did an incredibly brave thing, Ethan." I almost flinched at the sound of my name. "I don't feel brave." "No one does at first," she said simply. "The feeling comes later." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the shelter. Someone was crying softly a few rooms down. A door opened and closed. Water ran through pipes. I reached for my phone out of habit, then remembered I'd turned it off after the disownment. The Blackwoods had paid for the plan, and I didn't want anything from them anymore. The next morning, I used the shelter's computer to create a new email address. No more Ethan.Blackwood. Just Ethan18. A fresh digital identity to match my new reality. I found a job at a bookstore within walking distance of the shelter. The manager, Marcus, didn't ask too many questions when I explained I had limited work experience and was currently staying at a temporary housing facility. He just nodded and said, "Everyone's got a story. Can you start tomorrow?" The bookstore became my sanctuary. Organizing shelves, helping customers find the perfect read, losing myself in literature during slow periods, it created a bubble of normalcy I desperately needed. Marcus even let me borrow books as long as I returned them in pristine condition. "You got good taste, kid," he commented one evening, noting my selection of true crime and legal thrillers. "Interested in law?" I froze, a book half shelved in my hands. I used to be. He seemed to sense the shift in my mood. Well, whatever you're interested in, we probably got it here somewhere. 2 weeks into my stay at the shelter, I finally attended a group session. 8 chairs arranged in a circle. 7 faces wearing various expressions of trauma, recovery, and everything in between. I recognized none of them, which was a relief. The last thing I needed was for word to get back to my father that his disowned son was sitting in a circle talking about family abuse. The facilitator, a gentle-voiced man named Ray, opened the session. Remember, this is a safe space. Share only what you're comfortable with. There's no timeline for healing. When my turn came, I stared at my hands. My name is Ethan. I'm 18. 4 weeks ago, my family disowned me for reporting the sexual abuse I experienced from my uncle for 6 years. The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. I'd never said them aloud so plainly before. What happened when you reported it? Ray asked carefully. My father is a district attorney, I said, the irony not lost on anyone in the room. He's built his career prosecuting sex offenders. When I told him about his brother, my voice cracked. He chose his reputation over me. A woman across the circle nodded in recognition. The people who should protect us often protect themselves instead. After the session, a guy about my age approached me. Tall, with a wiry build and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping much better than I was. I'm Noah, he said, falling into step beside me. First time's the hardest. Does it get easier? I asked. He shrugged. Different, not easier. But it helps, talking about it. He glanced at me. Some of us grab coffee after groups sometimes. You're welcome to join. I almost declined automatically. Trust wasn't coming easily these days. But there was something in Noah's matter-of-fact invitation that didn't feel like pity. Maybe next time, I said. He nodded, no pressure. See you Thursday, then. Back in my room, I powered on my old phone for the first time since the disownment. It immediately exploded with notification sounds, texts, voicemails, emails. All from my family, their tones evolving from angry to concerned as the days passed with no word from me. Where are you? This rebellion has gone far enough. Please come home so we can talk about this like adults. Like adults. As if my father had acted like an adult when he threw his son's belongings onto the lawn. I scrolled through them detachedly, feeling like I was reading messages meant for someone else. In a way, I was. They were messaging Ethan Blackwood, the compliant son who would eventually come to his senses and prioritize the family name above all else. That person no longer existed. The last text was from my sister, Caroline, sent just yesterday. Mom and Dad won't tell me what happened. Just that you've made serious allegations. Please talk to me, I'm worried about you. My finger hovered over the reply button. Caroline was 3 years younger than me. We'd never been especially close. She was the golden child, the perfect daughter, while I was the disappointment even before I brought shame to the family. But there was a flicker of genuine concern in her message that the others lacked. Still, I turned the phone off without responding. Caroline had been at college when everything imploded. She hadn't been there to see our parents' reaction, to witness how quickly they discarded me. If she knew the truth and still sided with them, I couldn't bear it. And if she believed me over them, I didn't want to be responsible for destroying her relationship with our parents too. I switched to the shelter's computer and opened my new email account. There, I began composing a detailed account of everything that had happened with my uncle. Every incident I could remember. Dates, times, places when possible. The grooming. The escalation. The threats to keep me silent. It took hours. By the time I finished, my eyes were burning, and my hands were shaking. I saved the document but didn't send it. Not yet. This wasn't an impulsive act of revenge. This needed to be strategic. Because as much as the Blackwoods had tried to erase me, I knew too much about how they operated. My father hadn't become the youngest district attorney in the city's history by being careless. The Blackwood family responded to evidence, to irrefutable facts, to the threat of public exposure. And I had all three. You've been quiet lately, Marcus commented as we restocked the fantasy section. 3 weeks had passed since the disownment, and I'd fallen into a routine at the bookstore. Work, shelter, occasional group sessions, repeat. I shrugged. Just focused on the job. He shelved a copy of The Name of the Wind with careful precision. You know, when I was about your age, I thought I had my whole future mapped out. Then my mom got sick, and everything changed overnight. I paused, unsure where this was going. What I'm saying is, Marcus continued, life has a way of throwing curveballs. The plans you had might not be the plans you get to keep. I'm familiar with the concept, I said, more bitterly than intended. Marcus nodded. I figured. But here's the thing about curveballs, they force you to adapt. Create a new swing. Sometimes you miss, but sometimes. He mimed a home run hit. You end up somewhere better than your original destination. I appreciated that he wasn't prying for details. Did you? End up somewhere better? Different, he said, echoing Noah's assessment of healing. I wanted to be a professor. Literature. Had the acceptance letter and everything. Then Mom's medical bills hit, and that dream went on indefinite hold. I'm sorry. Don't be. I found this place instead. He gestured around the bookstore. Bought it 10 years ago when the previous owner retired. Not what I planned, but it's mine. And I still get to spend my days surrounded by stories. He gave me a significant look. Everyone's got one, like I said. The important part is who gets to control how it's told. His words stayed with me that evening as I returned to the shelter. Who gets to control how it's told? For 6 years, my uncle had controlled the narrative. Then my father had seized it, deciding my story was too inconvenient for his political ambitions. Now it was my turn. I joined Noah and 2 others from the support group for coffee that Thursday. We sat in a corner booth of a quiet cafe, far enough from other patrons that our conversations wouldn't be overheard. I'm thinking about going public, I said, surprising myself with the admission. I hadn't planned to share this, but something about the understanding nods from the group made the words tumble out. With your story? Asked Layla, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and nervous hands. That's significant. Noah studied me. What's your endgame? Justice, I said automatically. That's the headline, he replied. What's the fine print? I considered this. My father is a public figure. A district attorney who prosecutes the very crimes his brother committed. The hypocrisy is infuriating, supplied the 4th member of our group, a middle-aged man named Terrence. Beyond infuriating, I agreed. He's built this image as a champion for victims, all while silencing one in his own home. Layla's hand stilled around her mug. Going public has consequences. Trust me. The scrutiny, the disbelief, the way people look at you afterward. Like you're damaged goods. I know. Do you? She leaned forward. Because once that bell is rung, you can't unring it. Your name, your story, it'll be out there forever, attached to this trauma. Google results that never go away. Noah nodded. She's right. And your family, they'll fight back. Hard. They have resources, connections. They'll try to discredit you. I have evidence, I said. Evidence helps, Terrence acknowledged. But it doesn't shield you from the fallout. I looked around at their concerned faces. I'm not naive. I know what I'm risking. But my father is up for re-election next year. He's positioning himself for an eventual run at state attorney general. Maybe higher. All built on this foundation of lies. And you want to knock down that foundation, Noah surmised. I want the truth to be known, I corrected. I want my uncle to face consequences. I want my father to be seen for who he really is. Layla sighed. Just be prepared for people to side with them. People you never expected. It's easier to disbelieve one person than to accept that someone they respect could enable abuse. I've already lost everything, I said quietly. My family, my home, my future plans. What else can they take? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken warnings. Finally, Noah broke it. Whatever you decide, we've got your back, he said simply. The others nodded in agreement. For the first time since the night of my 18th birthday, I felt something like strength flickering within me. Back at the shelter, I revised my document. Not just a clinical accounting of the abuse now, but a comprehensive narrative that included my father's reaction, the disownment, everything. I researched reporters who had covered similar stories, focusing on those who had handled sensitive cases with integrity. I was meticulously building my case, just as I'd watched my father do countless times when he practiced closing arguments at home. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd inadvertently taught me exactly how to take him down. That weekend, I used my bookstore earnings to buy a burner phone. I wasn't ready to reach out to journalists yet, but I needed a way for people to contact me that wasn't tied to the shelter or my old phone. Then, 4 weeks to the day after my disownment, I wrote a letter. Not the comprehensive account, that would come later. This was simpler. A warning shot. Dear Father, 4 weeks ago, you made your choice. You chose your reputation over justice. Your brother over your son. Your name over the truth. I've spent these weeks carefully documenting everything. Every incident. Every conversation. Every text. Every journal entry. I've spoken with journalists interested in exposing the hypocrisy of a district attorney who shields a predator in his own home. Before I proceed, I'm giving you one chance to do the right thing. Turn Uncle James in. Publicly acknowledge what he did. Resign your position. You have 48 hours to begin this process. After that, I release everything. You taught me that the Blackwood name stands for justice. Let's see if you meant it. Ethan. I included my new phone number at the bottom. Then, in the pre-dawn hours, I drove to my former home and placed the sealed envelope on the doorstep. No postmark to trace. No digital trail. Just old-fashioned hand delivery, like the formal letter of disownment my father had thrust into my hands 4 weeks earlier. By the time I returned to the shelter, the sun was rising. I fell into an exhausted sleep, the burner phone on my pillow beside me. When I woke hours later, the missed calls had already begun. The first call came at 9:17 a.m., barely an hour after my parents would have found the letter. My father, of course. I let it go to voicemail. His message was exactly what I expected, blustering outrage wrapped in a thin veneer of parental concern. Ethan, this is your father. Whatever game you think you're playing needs to stop immediately. Come home so we can discuss this like rational people. Your mother is beside herself with worry. The second call came 20 minutes later. Him again. This is not how a man handles his problems. I raised you better than this. Call me back. Now. By noon, the tone had shifted. Listen to me very carefully. You are making accusations that could destroy lives. Think about what you're doing. Think about your sister, your mother. Is this the legacy you want? To be the one who tore apart this family? Legacy. Always back to the almighty Blackwood legacy. The calls from my mother began in the afternoon. Her voice softer, pleading. Ethan, darling, please come home. We miss you. Your father was upset that night, we both were. Things were said in the heat of the moment. Whatever you're going through, we can work it out together, as a family. As a family. The same family that had thrown me out like garbage. By evening, even my sister was calling, her voice tight with confusion. It's Caroline. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Dad's locked himself in his study with the family lawyer. What's going on? Please call me back. I turned off the burner phone at midnight. 48 hours. I'd given them 48 hours to do the right thing. The clock was ticking. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Marcus raised an eyebrow at my distracted shelving. Everything okay? Just didn't sleep well, I said, which wasn't a lie. He nodded, not pushing. Take your break whenever you need it. During lunch, I turned the burner phone back on. 27 missed calls. 15 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening. If they were going to do the right thing, they wouldn't be leaving desperate messages, they'd be holding a press conference, confessing everything. By closing time, I knew they weren't planning to comply. The Blackwoods were circling wagons, not preparing to surrender. Need a ride back to the shelter? Marcus asked as he locked up the shop. I shook my head. Thanks, but I think I'll walk. Clear my head. The evening air was cool, autumn settling in. I took the long route back, past the courthouse where my father worked. The imposing stone building loomed in the twilight, flags fluttering limply in the breeze. How many times had I waited in his office after school, watching him prepare cases against people he called the worst of society? The irony twisted in my gut like a knife. Back at the shelter, I powered on the burner phone again. More missed calls, including several from numbers I didn't recognize. My father must be reaching out through proxies now, family, friends, colleagues, anyone who might convince me to back down. One voicemail caught my attention. A woman identifying herself as Patricia Winters, an investigative reporter for the City Chronicle. Stating she'd heard rumors of a developing story involving the DA's office and would like to speak with me. How had she gotten this number? I hadn't reached out to any journalists yet. Unless my father was setting a trap. An opportunity for me to incriminate myself to someone who would report back to him. I saved the number but didn't call back. The 48-hour deadline expired at dawn. I spent the night finalizing my comprehensive document, triple-checking dates and details. When morning came, I was ready. I'd researched 3 journalists with strong records of covering abuse cases and government accountability. I composed emails to each, attaching my evidence and requesting confidentiality until publication. Just as I was about to hit send on the first email, there was a knock at my door. Ethan? It was Diane, the intake coordinator. You have visitors at reception. My heart rate spiked. Who? A young woman who says she's your sister. And a man with her. Caroline. But who was with her? My father? Uncle James? A lawyer? Tell them I'm not here, I said automatically. Diane's expression was sympathetic but firm. I already told them you are. Shelter policy, we don't lie for residents. It undermines trust in the program. She paused. You don't have to see them. I can send them away. But they're here. I closed my laptop slowly, mind racing. The man. What does he look like? Tall, blonde. About your age, maybe a little older. Not my father, then. Not my uncle. Who would Caroline bring with her? Curiosity overcame caution. I'll see them. In the common area, not my room. Diane nodded. I'll be at the front desk if you need anything. The common area was mostly empty at this hour. Caroline stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Beside her was a face I recognized but couldn't immediately place. Then it clicked. Jason Reynolds. My sister's boyfriend. Star quarterback at her university. Caroline saw me first, her face lighting up with relief. Ethan. She rushed toward me, arms outstretched, but stopped short when I took a step back. What are you doing here? I asked, voice deliberately flat. Her arms fell to her sides. Looking for you, obviously. We've been worried sick. We? The family, she clarified, as if it should be obvious. Mom hasn't slept in days. Dad's. I don't care about Dad, I cut her off. Her expression hardened slightly. What is this about, Ethan? These accusations, this letter. It's insane. Is it? I looked directly at Jason, who was hanging back awkwardly. Why did you bring him? Caroline glanced back at her boyfriend. Because I didn't want to come alone, and he has a car. She lowered her voice. And because I didn't think you'd see me if Mom or Dad came. She was right about that, at least. What did they tell you? I asked, gesturing for them to sit at a small table in the corner, away from the few other residents in the room. Caroline sat, smoothing her designer jeans nervously. That you've been making serious allegations against Uncle James. That you threatened to go to the press with lies if Dad doesn't. What was it? Publicly acknowledge them and resign. And you think they're lies? Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. I think something must have happened to make you this angry. But Ethan, destroying Dad's career, smearing Uncle James. That's not the answer. You have no idea what the answer is, I said quietly. Because you have no idea what the question is. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Caroline shot him a look that clearly said, I told you this would be difficult. Then tell me, she said, turning back to me. What's really going on? Why did you leave home? I almost laughed. Leave? Is that what they told you? That I left? Her brow furrowed. Dad said you had a fight and you stormed out. Of course he did. The great Richard Blackwood would never admit to throwing his son out on the street. Caroline, I said carefully, I didn't leave. I was disowned. Formally. With papers. After Dad threw all my belongings onto the front lawn in the rain. Her eyes widened. What? No, that's not. He wouldn't. Ask Mom, I suggested. She watched the whole thing. Caroline's hand went to her mouth. But why? What could possibly? Because I told them that Uncle James had been sexually abusing me since I was 12 years old. And Dad decided that was inconvenient for his political future. The words hung in the air between us. Jason looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Caroline had gone deathly pale. That's not possible, she whispered. Uncle James is. He's always been so. Charming? I supplied. Generous? The fun uncle who always brought the best gifts? She nodded slowly, her worldview visibly crumbling around her. That's how predators operate, Caroline. They create a public persona that makes accusations against them seem impossible to believe. A tear slid down her cheek. Why didn't you tell me? All these years. I couldn't tell anyone. He made sure of that. I leaned forward. But I'm telling the truth now. And in less than an hour, I'm sending everything to journalists who will make sure everyone knows what kind of man leads our district attorney's office. Caroline wiped her eyes. There has to be another way. If what you're saying is true, it is. Then let me help, she pleaded. Let me talk to Mom and Dad. Make them understand. I shook my head. They've had their chance. Multiple chances. The deadline was this morning. Please, Ethan. Give me one day. Just one. Let me try to fix this before our family is splashed across the headlines. I studied my sister's face. The genuine shock and horror told me she truly hadn't known. She wasn't part of the cover-up. Just another victim of our father's lies. One day, I agreed finally. But I'm not stopping my preparations. If nothing changes by this time tomorrow, the emails go out. Relief washed over her features. Thank you. I promise I'll make them listen. She reached for my hand across the table. And Ethan. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I allowed the brief contact before pulling away. Call me when you've spoken to them. Not before. She nodded and stood to leave, Jason following silently. At the door, she turned back. I believe you, she said simply. Then they were gone. I returned to my room, thoughts churning. Had I made a mistake giving them more time? Was I being manipulated again, the way I'd been manipulated for years? No. This wasn't about my parents anymore. Caroline deserved a chance to process the truth before it became public knowledge. She was as much a victim of our father's deception as I was, just in a different way. I powered on the burner phone. 3 new voicemails since I'd last checked. One from my mother, begging me to call. One from a lawyer whose name I recognized from my father's firm, offering to discuss the situation privately. And one from Patricia Winters, the reporter. Same message as before, requesting a conversation about rumors involving the DA's office. My finger hovered over her number. Maybe I should at least hear what she knew. If my father was already doing damage control, I needed to be prepared. Before I could decide, the phone rang in my hand. Caroline. That was fast. Hello? Her voice came through breathless, as if she'd been running. Ethan, you need to come home. Right now. That's not happening. No, you don't understand. Dad's arrested Uncle James. The world tilted on its axis. What? He called a special prosecutor from the next county. They came and took Uncle James away in handcuffs 10 minutes ago. There are reporters outside the house. Dad's going to make a statement. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of statement? I don't know exactly. He's in his study with Mom and some people from his office. Her voice dropped. He's been crying, Ethan. I've never seen him cry before. My mind raced to process this development. Was it genuine remorse, or another calculated political move? My father always thought 10 steps ahead. I'm not coming home, I said firmly. But I want to hear this statement. Can you stay on the phone so I can listen? Hold on. I heard muffled conversation, then Caroline's voice returned. They're about to start. I'm going to put you on speaker and hide the phone in my pocket. Don't say anything. The sound quality deteriorated as she presumably hid the phone. I could make out movement, voices, the click of cameras. Then my father's voice, uncharacteristically subdued. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I have a brief statement to make, and then I will be taking a leave of absence from the district attorney's office. Murmurs from the assembled press. Today, I directed the special prosecutor's office to arrest James Blackwood, my brother, on charges related to the sexual abuse of a minor. This action follows credible evidence brought to my attention by the victim, who is a member of my family. My heart pounded in my ears. He was actually doing it. As district attorney, I have built my career advocating for victims of sexual crimes. I have often spoken about how these predators must be brought to justice, no matter who they are or what position they hold in society. A pause. When he continued, his voice was thick with emotion. What I failed to acknowledge, even to myself, was that this principle must apply even when the predator is someone I love. And when the victim is my own son. Gasps from the crowd. Rapid-fire clicking of cameras. I have failed as a district attorney, as a father, and as a human being. When my son came to me with his account of abuse, I reacted not with the compassion and justice I have claimed to stand for, but with denial and anger. I chose to protect my brother and my political career rather than my child. I sank onto my bed, legs suddenly unable to support me. For this grievous moral failure, I am profoundly sorry. I am recusing myself from any involvement in the case against my brother, which will be handled entirely by the special prosecutor's office. I am taking an indefinite leave of absence from my position as district attorney, effective immediately, to focus on supporting my son and rebuilding the trust I have shattered. He cleared his throat. To my son, if you are somehow hearing this, I cannot undo the pain I've caused you. Not just in my reaction to your disclosure, but in my failure to protect you from harm under my own roof for all these years. I can only promise that from this moment forward, I will do everything in my power to ensure that justice is served, and to earn back even a fraction of the trust I have destroyed. Questions erupted from the press, but I couldn't focus on them. The phone rustled as Caroline presumably retrieved it and moved away from the crowd. Did you hear that? She asked once she was somewhere quieter. I heard, I said, my voice distant to my own ears. He means it, Ethan. I've never seen him like this. It's like he finally sees what he's done. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. I need to think. I'll call you back. I ended the call and sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. My father had publicly admitted everything. Had arrested his own brother. Had apologized, not just privately, but in front of cameras and reporters. Was it enough? Could anything ever be enough? The burner phone rang again. Patricia Winters. The reporter. I answered. This is Ethan. Ethan Blackwood? She asked, professional but gentle. Yes. I'm Patricia Winters from the City Chronicle. I'm calling about the statement your father just made. Would you be willing to comment? My mind raced. This was my chance to control the narrative, just as Marcus had said. To tell my story in my own words. Not today, I decided. But maybe tomorrow. I need some time. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. Here's my direct line when you're ready. After she hung up, I switched to my old phone. The one with the Blackwood family plan. I powered it on for the first time in a week. Hundreds of notifications flooded in. I ignored them all, scrolling to find the most recent message from my father. It had been sent just minutes ago. Ethan, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. What I did was unforgivable. But please, if you can bear it, call this number. I need to hear your voice. I need to tell you myself how sorry I am. Dad. Dad. Not father. Not Richard Blackwood, district attorney. Just Dad. My finger hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to maintain the wall I'd built between myself and the family that had discarded me. They didn't deserve my forgiveness. They didn't deserve another chance. But another part, the part that had been writing that detailed account, collecting evidence, preparing to go public, recognized that this was what I'd wanted all along. Not revenge. Justice. Acknowledgement. Truth. My uncle arrested. My father publicly admitting his failure. The Blackwood name associated not with political power but with accountability. I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I composed a text. I heard your statement. I need time. Don't contact me again until I reach out first. Simple. Direct. Boundaries established. His reply came seconds later. I understand. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when if you're ready. Your room is exactly as you left it. I stared at those last words. Your room is exactly as you left it. No, it wasn't. My room had been emptied onto the front lawn. My belongings soaked by rain. Unless. A new text from Caroline landed before I could finish the thought. They got everything back. Mom made Dad gather up every single thing from the lawn that night after you left. She's been washing and drying your clothes, cleaning everything. Your room looks untouched. I put the phone down, unsure how to feel about this revelation. Had my mother been silently rebelling against my father's decision all along? Or was this just another manipulation? I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying my father's press conference, analyzing every word, searching for hidden agendas or genuine remorse. By morning, the story had exploded. I browsed news sites on the shelter's computer, seeing my family name in every headline. District Attorney Blackwood steps down after family abuse scandal. DA orders arrest of own brother in shocking abuse case. Blackwood confession sends shockwaves through prosecutor's office. The articles were careful not to name me directly, referring only to Blackwood's son, a minor at the time of the alleged abuse. Small mercies. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Just saw the news. You okay? I replied simply, processing. At the bookstore, Marcus gave me a knowing look as I arrived for my shift. Quite the news day, he said, sliding a newspaper across the counter. The Blackwood scandal dominated the front page. You knew, I realized. All this time, you knew who I was. He shrugged. Wasn't hard to figure out. Not many 18-year-olds get thrown out of their homes the same week they turn legal age. And your last name was on your employment paperwork. He paused. Plus, you look like him. Around the eyes. I flinched at the comparison. Sorry, Marcus said. That was thoughtless. Look, if you need the day off, I'd rather work, I interrupted. Keep my mind occupied. He nodded. Fair enough. Inventory in the back needs sorting. I was grateful for the solitary task, methodically checking stock against order sheets in the quiet storage room. No prying eyes, no whispered conversations cutting off as I approached. Just books and silence. Midway through my shift, Patricia Winters called again. I know you said you needed time, she began, but I wanted to let you know that we're running a feature tomorrow on your father's announcement. If you'd like to share your perspective, even anonymously, the offer stands. Why me? I asked. There must be dozens of people you could interview about this. Former colleagues, legal experts, abuse advocates. Because this story isn't just about your father or your uncle, she said. It's about systems that fail victims. About powerful men who protect other powerful men. About the price of speaking truth. A pause. And because it's your story, Ethan. You deserve to tell it in your own words, if you want to. I considered this. If I were to speak with you. Hypothetically. How would it work? However you're comfortable. In person, phone, email. On the record, anonymous, or background only. You set the terms. I'll think about it, I promised. After I hung up, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Everything all right? Reporter, I explained. Wants my side of the story. He leaned against the doorframe. You going to give it to them? I don't know. What would you do? Marcus considered this. Depends on what you want the outcome to be. What's your endgame here, kid? It was the same question Noah had asked. Justice, I guess. And has that been achieved? Your uncle's arrested. Your father stepped down and publicly admitted his failure. It's a start, I acknowledged. But not enough? I set down the inventory clipboard. I don't know what enough looks like. That's the problem. When does something like this ever feel resolved? Marcus nodded slowly. That's the million-dollar question. Most people who've been through trauma are looking for closure. But closure is tricky, it's not a destination you arrive at. It's more like a practice. Something you work at daily. Sounds exhausting. It is, he agreed. But less exhausting than carrying the weight of unresolved pain forever. He straightened up. Whatever you decide about the reporter, remember you're the one who controls your story now. Not your father, not your uncle. You. After work, I found Noah waiting outside the bookstore. Thought you might want company, he said. Unless you'd rather be alone. I surprised myself by saying, company would be good. We walked to a small park a few blocks away, finding a bench away from the playground where families were enjoying the early evening air. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by the kind of headlines currently featuring my family name. So, Noah said after we sat in silence for a while. Your dad actually did it. Turned in his brother. Seems that way. You don't sound convinced. I sighed. I don't know what to believe anymore. Yesterday morning, I was ready to blow up my family's reputation. Today, my father's done it himself. Isn't that what you wanted? Yes. No. I ran a hand through my hair. I wanted him to do the right thing. I just didn't expect him to actually do it. Noah nodded. So what now? That's what everyone keeps asking me. What now? What's my endgame? What do I want? I kicked at a pebble near my foot. But nobody seems to understand that I never planned for this outcome. I was prepared for a fight. For denial. For them to close ranks against me. And instead, they imploded. Exactly. And now I'm supposed to. What? Forgive them? Go home like nothing happened? Continue with the exposé anyway? Noah was quiet for a moment. When I finally told someone about what happened to me, do you know what I wanted most? I shook my head. To be believed, he said simply. That was it. Just to have someone look me in the eye and say I believe you, and what happened to you is wrong. It took 3 years to get that. I'm sorry. He shrugged. My point is, figuring out what you want now is complicated. Because trauma messes with your sense of justice. Your expectations. Your ability to trust outcomes. I absorbed this. A reporter wants to interview me. Get my side of the story. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just disappear. Start over somewhere new. Where nobody knows the Blackwood name. Noah nodded. That's always an option. But secrets have a way of following you, man. Trust me on that. We sat in companionable silence as the sun began to set, parents calling children away from the playground, the park gradually emptying. Whatever you decide, Noah said eventually, remember you're not alone in this. Me, the group, we've got your back. For the second time, I felt that flicker of strength. Not the vengeful fire that had fueled my letter to my father, but something steadier. The beginnings of resilience, maybe. Thanks, I said. That means a lot. Back at the shelter, I found several messages waiting. Caroline, asking if I'd seen the news coverage. My mother, a simple text that read only, I failed you. I'm so sorry. And a voicemail from Patricia Winters, informing me that she'd be at the cafe across from the courthouse tomorrow morning if I wanted to talk. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, weighing my options. The comprehensive document I'd prepared still sat unsent in my email drafts. The evidence against my uncle, and my parents' initial reaction, still existed. I could still release everything, tell my unfiltered story to Patricia Winters, ensure that no sanitized version of events could emerge. Or I could remain silent. Let the legal process take its course. Allow my father's public confession to stand as the official narrative. The thought nagged at me, what if this was just another calculation on his part? A strategic retreat to preserve what remained of the Blackwood reputation? Get ahead of the story before I could tell it my way? I needed to know. And there was only one way to find out. Just before midnight, I texted my father, why did you change your mind? His reply came almost instantly, as if he'd been waiting by the phone, I didn't change my mind. I finally saw the truth. There's a difference. Explain. A longer pause this time. Then, after you left, your mother found your journal. The one you showed me that I refused to read. She read it. Made me read it. I couldn't deny the truth anymore. Another text followed quickly, that's not the whole answer. The whole answer is that I was a coward. I chose my brother over my son because it was easier. Easier to believe he was innocent than to face what that meant about my judgment. About my failure to protect you. I was wrong. Unforgivably wrong. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. Why should I believe you now? You shouldn't. Not yet. I haven't earned that trust back. Maybe I never will. But I'm trying to do what I should have done the moment you told me. The right thing, no matter the cost. I didn't reply right away. His words seemed genuine, but words had never been the problem. My father had always been eloquent. Persuasive. It was his actions that had betrayed me. Finally, I texted, I'm meeting with a reporter tomorrow. Patricia Winters from the City Chronicle. His response was immediate, I understand. Will you tell her everything? Would you try to stop me if I said yes? Another pause. No. It's your story to tell. I'll answer for my actions, whatever you decide. I put the phone down, my decision made. The cafe was busy when I arrived the next morning. Patricia Winters was easy to spot, professionally dressed, laptop open, scanning the room with keen eyes. She recognized me immediately, standing to greet me as I approached. Ethan. Thank you for coming. I slid into the chair across from her. I haven't decided how much I'm going to share. She nodded, unsurprised. That's completely fair. Would you like something to drink first? This conversation can happen at your pace. I ordered a coffee, using the time it took to arrive to organize my thoughts. Patricia waited patiently, not pushing. I want to know something first, I said when the coffee came. How did you get my number? The burner phone. She smiled slightly. Good question. Professional secret. At my frown, she relented. One of your father's staffers contacted me. Said there was a family situation developing that might become public. Gave me your number. Which staffer? Sarah Donovan. His chief of staff for the past 5 years. I knew Sarah. She'd been a fixture in our home, at campaign events, always by my father's side professionally. She had never particularly warmed to Uncle James. Did my father know she contacted you? Patricia considered this. I don't believe so. She seemed to be acting independently. Concerned, perhaps, that the situation was being mishandled. Interesting. So there had been cracks in the wall of silence even before my ultimatum. My father's made his statement, I said. Arrested his brother. Stepped down temporarily. What more is there to report? The human story behind the headlines, she replied simply. Your father has given his perspective. Your uncle will presumably offer his defense in court. I'm interested in your experience. Why? For ratings? To sell papers? She didn't flinch at my accusation. Partially, yes. I won't pretend this isn't a compelling story that people will want to read. But also because silence protects abusers. The more survivors speak out, the harder it is for the next predator to operate in the shadows. I took a sip of coffee, buying time. If I do this, there are conditions. Name them. My privacy. No photographs. No details about where I'm staying now. She nodded. Agreed. And I want to review the article before it's published. Not to change facts, but to make sure I'm represented accurately. That's not standard practice, she said carefully. But in this case, I can agree to let you review your direct quotes and the sections specifically about your experience. It was a reasonable compromise. One more thing. I don't want this to be just about my family. About the Blackwood scandal. I want to talk about what happens to male victims of sexual abuse. How we're treated differently. How much harder it is to come forward. Patricia's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's exactly the kind of perspective that's missing from most coverage. I'd be honored to help you tell that story. And so I began talking. Haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence. I told her about the grooming, the isolation, the threats. About finally finding the courage to speak on my 18th birthday. About the disownment in the rain. I showed her the letter my father had thrust into my hands. The journal entries I'd kept over the years. The text messages from my uncle that, read with knowing eyes, revealed clear patterns of manipulation and control. Patricia took notes, asked clarifying questions, but mostly just listened. She didn't sensationalize or push for graphic details. When I faltered, she gave me space to collect myself. What made you decide to issue the ultimatum? She asked eventually. After 4 weeks of silence, why then? I considered this. I needed time to build my case. To gather evidence. To find my voice. I paused. And I needed to be ready for them to choose him over me again. But they didn't. No, I acknowledged. That was unexpected. And now? Are you planning to return home? The question I'd been asking myself since hearing my father's public confession. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me thinks I should maintain the distance. Start fresh somewhere else. Another part. Wants reconciliation? She suggested gently. Not reconciliation, I corrected. Accountability. Real change. I can't just pretend those 4 weeks didn't happen. Or the 6 years before that. Patricia nodded. In your ideal scenario, what would that accountability look like? It was a good question. One I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. My uncle facing justice through the legal system. My father taking concrete actions to support male survivors of sexual abuse, not just with words but with policy changes, resources. My mother. I trailed off. Your mother? I sighed. I don't know yet. She was complicit in her silence. But she was also the one who apparently made my father read my journal after I left. Who kept my room intact. Patricia closed her notebook. Thank you for sharing all this with me, Ethan. I know it couldn't have been easy. When will the article run? I need to write it up and get it through editorial. Day after tomorrow, most likely. I'll send you the relevant sections to review before then. As we stood to leave, she hesitated. Can I offer one observation? Not as a reporter, just as someone who's covered a lot of family trauma cases. I nodded cautiously. Healing doesn't require forgiveness, she said. But it does require deciding what role, if any, these people will have in your life going forward. That decision belongs entirely to you. On your timeline. Outside the cafe, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Caroline. A text from Noah asking how the interview went. And a message from Marcus, taking inventory at the store. Could use an extra pair of hands if you're free. I texted him back, on my way. The bookstore was quiet when I arrived, most of the day's customers still at work or school. Marcus looked up from the register, raising an eyebrow. Didn't actually expect you to come in. Thought you'd be busy with everything. I could use the normalcy, I admitted. He nodded. Back room, then. I've got new arrivals that need processing. We worked in companionable silence for nearly an hour, me logging ISBN numbers while Marcus affixed price stickers. Finally, he spoke. Met that reporter, did you? Yeah. And? I shelved another book. Told her everything. Article runs day after tomorrow. He whistled low. Big step. Feels right, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. My story, my terms. Marcus smiled slightly. There it is. There what is? That thing I was talking about before. Control of your own narrative. He paused in his stickering. So what's next on the agenda? I shrugged. Haven't decided. Caroline wants me to meet with our parents. Talk things through. And you're not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, I admitted. But I'm also not sure I can move forward without confronting them directly. Marcus nodded. The thing about trauma recovery, and I'm no expert, just speaking from experience, is that it's never a straight line. Sometimes you need to circle back to move forward. Meaning? Meaning maybe you need the conversation to close one chapter before you can open the next one. Doesn't mean you have to forgive. Doesn't mean you have to forget. Just means you get to look them in the eye and speak your truth, now that they might actually be ready to hear it. I considered this. I'm meeting with the prosecutor handling my uncle's case tomorrow. After that. Maybe. No rush, Marcus said, returning to his price stickers. The books aren't going anywhere. Job's here when you need it. That afternoon, I sent a text to my sister, not ready to come home yet. But I'll think about meeting somewhere neutral. Just the four of us. Her reply was instantaneous, name the time and place. We'll be there. The special prosecutor's office was housed in a modern building across town, away from my father's domain at the courthouse. I'd taken a bus, not wanting to ask anyone for a ride to something so personal. AITA Melissa Chen greeted me in the lobby, her handshake firm, her eyes direct but compassionate. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Blackwood. I know this can't be easy. I followed her to a conference room, where she explained the process ahead. The evidence I'd provided. What would be needed from me. The likelihood of a plea deal versus a trial. Your uncle's attorney has already reached out about potential plea negotiations, she said, watching my reaction carefully. Already? It's only been 2 days. She nodded. These cases often move quickly once charges are filed. Especially when the evidence is strong and the accused is well connected. You mean when they're worried about publicity? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. That can be a factor, yes. We've made it clear that any plea would require full admission of guilt, registration as a sex offender, and significant jail time. No special treatment because of his family connections. Will I have to testify? If it goes to trial? Most likely, yes. But we would prepare you thoroughly. And there are protective measures we can take to make the process less traumatic. I nodded, trying to absorb all the information. The legal machinery was in motion now, grinding toward its own version of justice. It felt both empowering and overwhelming. What about my father? I asked. Will he face any consequences for initially covering this up? AITA Chen's expression turned careful. Legally, that's complicated. There could be ethical violations for his handling of the case, but those would be addressed by the Bar Association, not criminal court. So he gets a slap on the wrist. I can't speak to what professional consequences he might face, she said diplomatically. But I can tell you that his cooperation now has been complete and unequivocal. He's provided access to any evidence we've requested. Made himself available for questioning. Recused himself entirely from any involvement in the case. I absorbed this. So what happens now? We continue building our case. You continue working with the victim advocate we've assigned to you. And you focus on your own well-being. She handed me her card. Call me anytime if you have questions. Day or night. Outside the prosecutor's office, I checked my phone. A text from Patricia Winters, draft sections for your review, as promised. Let me know if anything needs adjusting. I skimmed the document she'd attached. She'd handled my story with sensitivity and nuance, weaving in statistics about male sexual abuse survivors, the additional barriers to disclosure they face, the specific tactics used by family abusers. My quotes were accurate, powerful without being sensationalized. Looks good, I replied. Thank you for getting this right. The next text I sent required more thought. To Caroline, Saturday. Noon. The cafe at the art museum. Just the four of us. Her reply, we'll be there. Thank you, E. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for facing the parents who had thrown me out. Who had chosen silence and reputation over justice and protection. Who had, belatedly, taken actions that suggested remorse. I wasn't ready to forgive. Wasn't sure I ever would be. But I was ready to speak my truth to their faces. To decide for myself what role, if any, they would have in my life going forward. As Patricia Winters had said, that decision belonged entirely to me. On my timeline. For the first time since that rainy night 4 weeks ago, I felt something like peace. Not the peace of resolution, that was still far off, if it ever came at all. But the peace of agency. Of knowing that whatever happened next, I was the one who would determine my path forward. The Blackwood name would never be the same. My father's political ambitions were in ruins. My uncle would face justice through the courts. And I would rebuild. One day at a time. On my terms. I walked back to the shelter, the afternoon sun warm on my face, planning what I would say when I finally sat across from my parents. The words I needed them to hear. The boundaries I needed to establish. The man I was becoming in the aftermath of betrayal. They'd called me nonstop since finding my letter. Now they would listen. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of justice. 4 months later. The small apartment wasn't much, a studio with questionable heating and a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. Paid for with my bookstore salary and a small trust fund my grandfather had established years ago, which had finally been released to me after a court battle with the trustees. I hung the last framed photograph on the wall, me with Noah and 2 others from our support group at a hiking trail we'd tackled last weekend. New memories. New connections. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, new shipment just arrived. Russian literature. Your favorite. I smiled. The promotion to assistant manager had come with more responsibilities but also more hours, more stability. Marcus had become something of a mentor, teaching me the business side of the bookstore with hints that he might consider a partnership someday if I was interested. Another text arrived, this one from Caroline. Lunch Sunday? I can drive up. Our relationship was healing slowly. She'd broken things off with Jason the quarterback, transferred to a university closer to home. Started volunteering at a crisis center. Small steps toward understanding. I texted back, Sunday works. The diner on 4th at 1? The article Patricia Winters had written had run as planned, thoughtful and impactful. It had sparked a series of follow-up pieces about male survivors, about family abuse dynamics, about institutional failures. She'd called last week about a potential book project, expanding the conversation further. I was considering it. My uncle had accepted a plea deal, 15 years, possibility of parole after 12. Not enough, perhaps, but enough that I wouldn't have to endure a trial. Enough that he would be registered as a sex offender for life. His name forever associated with his crimes. My father had resigned permanently from the district attorney's office. The ethics investigation was ongoing, but his career in law enforcement was effectively over. He'd started working with a national organization focused on supporting male survivors of sexual abuse, funding research and resources. Actions, not just words. My mother had filed for divorce. Moved into an apartment of her own. Started therapy. Called me weekly, though I still screened most of her calls. Some wounds were slower to heal than others. As for me, I was taking classes at the community college. Writing about my experiences. Considering a future in psychology or social work. Finding purpose in the aftermath. The nightmares still came sometimes. The trust issues remained. The anger flared unexpectedly. Recovery wasn't linear, as my therapist often reminded me. But the days when the trauma defined me were growing fewer. I thought often of what I'd said to my father that rainy night, standing on the lawn with my belongings scattered around me and that letter of disownment in my hands. Don't worry. I'll make sure no one ever forgets it. The Blackwood name had been forever changed, just as I'd promised. But not in the way I'd imagined then, consumed by rage and betrayal. Not through public destruction, but through painful, necessary truth. Through accountability. Through the courage to speak when silence would have been easier. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Ben from the Survivor Group. Noah gave me your number. We're starting a peer mentorship program for teenage boys coming out of similar situations. Thought you might want to help. No pressure. I looked around my small apartment. At the books lining my makeshift shelves. At the hiking photo on the wall. At the community college brochure spread across my table. At the journal where I'd been writing my story, not just the trauma parts, but all of it. The survival. The rebuilding. The path forward. I texted back, I'm interested. Tell me more. Some stories don't end. They evolve. Transform. Become something new. My father had once told me that the Blackwood name stood for justice. In my own way, perhaps it still could. Not through power or politics. But through truth. Through breaking silences. Through helping others find their voices when the world would prefer they stay quiet. That night, I added a final entry to the journal I'd kept since I was 12. The one that had documented years of abuse, of silence, of survival. The one that had finally forced my father to see the truth. 4 months since the letter. Since they found it on their doorstep. Since everything changed. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become next. And I choose to become unsilenceable. Story 2. My husband lost his job. You'll cover our bills, and pay for my kids' private school, my sister yelled on my birthday. I answered, not my problem, and confirmed my new job in another state. Right then my mother yelled disowned, do not come back until you give your sister $200,000. I just walked out silently. That night, I checked my banks and removed any shared payments in my name, their mortgage I'd been covering, 4 car payments, and all utilities I'd quietly paid for years. I woke up to 59 missed calls. Look, I need to tell someone this story because it's so unhinged that even my therapist had to take notes. 3 months ago, I thought I had a family. Today, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Denver, watching my phone blow up with threats from people who share my DNA but apparently not my sense of reality. It started on my 32nd birthday. Not with cake or presents, but with my sister Carmen barging through my front door like she owned the place, which, considering I'd been paying half her mortgage for 2 years, maybe she thought she did. Marcus, we need to talk, she announced, not even bothering with a hello. Her husband Derek shuffled behind her, looking like a kick dog in an expensive suit that I probably helped buy. Their 3 kids, Emma, 12, Tyler, 10, and little Sophie, 7, spread out across my living room like they were claiming territory. Happy birthday to me, I guess, I muttered, muting the Lakers game I'd been watching alone. Again. Carmen planted herself on my couch, the one I'd saved 6 months to afford after my divorce cleaned me out. Derek lost his job. Sorry to hear that. I wasn't, really. Derek worked in some vague corporate position that seemed to involve a lot of golf and expense accounts. The kind of job where you make 6 figures but can't explain what you actually do. Northridge Industries downsized his entire department, Derek added, like that explained everything. Budget cuts. That's rough, I said, already knowing where this was heading. In our family, every conversation eventually led to my wallet. When did it happen? 2 weeks ago. Carmen's voice had that edge it got when she wanted something. We've been trying to figure out our options. I looked at the kids. Emma was scrolling through her phone, probably the latest iPhone I'd helped fund through their family plan that somehow included me. Tyler was eyeing my gaming setup with the predatory focus of a kid who'd already broken 2 controllers at home. Sophie was coloring in a book, the only one who seemed oblivious to the tension crackling through the room. What kind of options? I asked, though I already knew. We'd danced this dance before. Carmen leaned forward, putting on what I called her concerned sister face. We need you to help us out. Just temporarily. How temporarily, and how much help? Derek cleared his throat. Well, there's the mortgage, which I already help with, I interrupted. And the kids' private school tuition is due next month, Carmen continued, talking over me like I hadn't spoken. Emma's in her final year at Willowbrook Prep, and we can't disrupt that. Tyler just made the lacrosse team, and Sophie's finally settled in with her friends. I did the math in my head. Willowbrook Prep ran about $18,000 per kid per year. Times 3 kids. Plus their mortgage payment, which was $2,800 a month in a neighborhood that screamed we're definitely not poor to anyone driving by. So you're asking for? We calculated it out, Derek said, pulling out his phone like he was presenting a business proposal. With living expenses, the mortgage, tuition, car payments, just to keep everything stable until I find something new, we'd need about $15,000 a month. Maybe 18 to be safe. I stared at him. Actually stared. The audacity was so complete it took my breath away. $18,000 per month. It's not forever, Carmen jumped in. Derek's already got some promising interviews lined up. Tech companies are always looking for experienced managers. I wanted to laugh. Derek's idea of managing involved delegating everything to underpaid assistants while he networked at country clubs. But I kept my mouth shut and waited for the real ask. We were thinking, Carmen said, glancing at Derek for support, maybe you could just cover us for the next year or so. Until Derek gets back on his feet. It would only be about $200,000 total. There it was. $200,000. Said as casually as asking to borrow a cup of sugar. Carmen. I kept my voice level, the way you talk to someone having a breakdown in public. I don't have $200,000. But you could get it, she pressed. Your credit's perfect, you've got equity in this place, and you just got that promotion at work. Plus Mom said you've been saving like crazy since the divorce. Of course Mom had been discussing my finances. Family meetings about my money were apparently a regular thing I wasn't invited to. Even if I could, which is a big if, why would I? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Carmen's face went through several expressions, surprise, hurt, and then something uglier. Because we're family, she said, her voice rising. Because I was there when Sarah left you. Because Derek and I have always supported you. Supported me how, exactly? We include you in family gatherings, where I bring the food and pay for dinner. We invite you to the kids' events, which I attend alone while you and Derek network with other parents. Marcus. Derek tried to sound reasonable, like we were negotiating a business deal. You don't have kids. You don't have a wife anymore. What are you saving money for? The casual cruelty of it hit me like a slap. My divorce had been messy in public, at least within our small family circle. Sarah had left me for her yoga instructor, taking half of everything and most of my confidence with her. Derek knew this. Carmen definitely knew this. They were weaponizing my loneliness. Maybe I'm saving for my own future, I said quietly. What future? Carmen's voice had shifted into full attack mode. You're 32, Marcus. You work in IT support. You live alone in a 2-bedroom condo and spend your weekends playing video games. We're asking you to invest in something meaningful, in family, in the kids' futures. Emma looked up from her phone. Uncle Marcus, Mom says you might pay for our school. That's so cool. Madison's uncle bought her a car for her birthday, but paying for school is way more generous. The innocent manipulation in her voice made my stomach turn. These kids had been raised to see me as a walking ATM, and they didn't even realize it. Emma, honey, why don't you take Tyler and Sophie into the kitchen and find some snacks? I suggested. Are there any of those good cookies left? Tyler asked, already heading toward my pantry like he owned it. Help yourself, I said, watching them file out. Once they were gone, I turned back to my sister and her husband. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said, keeping my voice conversational. Derek loses his job, and instead of downsizing or pulling the kids from private school or selling one of your 3 cars, your solution is to ask me for $200,000. It's not asking, Carmen said. It's family supporting family. And if I say no? The look that passed between them was loaded with meaning I didn't like. Why would you say no? Derek asked. Unless you don't care about your family. That's when my mother's voice cut through the tension like a rusty knife. Of course he cares about family. Mom had let herself in through my back door, using the key I'd given her for emergencies, and was standing in my kitchen doorway holding a casserole dish. At 68, Patricia Holloway still commanded attention when she walked into a room. She'd raised 3 kids as a single mother after Dad died, and she wielded guilt like a surgeon wields a scalpel. "Mom," I said, standing up. "I didn't know you were coming by." "It's your birthday, sweetheart. I brought your favorite lasagna." She set the dish on my counter and surveyed the scene with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I see Carmen and Derek are here too. Are we having a family meeting?" "Something like that," Carmen said, her voice taking on the particular tone she used with Mom, respectful but slightly whiny, like she was still 12 years old. Mom settled into my recliner, the one I'd bought specifically for her visits, and folded her hands in her lap. "Well, don't let me interrupt. What are we discussing?" "Derek lost his job," Carmen said. "We were asking Marcus if he could help us out financially until Derek finds something new." "How much help?" Mom asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew. "About $200,000, Derek said, trying to sound like this was a reasonable amount. Mom's eyebrows rose slightly. She looked at me with the expression she used to wear when I brought home bad report cards. "And what did you say, Marcus?" This was it. The moment I'd been dreading my entire adult life. The moment when I'd have to choose between being a good son and being a person with boundaries. "I said I'd think about it," I lied. "Good," Mom said, nodding approvingly. "Family takes care of family. That's how we've always done things." Carmen smiled triumphantly. Derek relaxed back into my couch. And I realized with crystal clarity that I'd just been played by experts. "Of course," Mom continued, "it would be quite a sacrifice for Marcus. $200,000 is a significant amount. But he can afford it," Carmen said quickly. "He's been saving, and he got that promotion, did he?" Mom's voice sharpened. "Marcus, tell me about this promotion." This was where it got complicated. I had gotten a promotion, sort of. My company had offered me a position as regional IT director for their Colorado operations. It came with a 30% pay raise, full relocation assistance, and stock options. The catch was that I had to be willing to move to Denver within the next 3 months. I'd been wrestling with the decision for weeks. It meant leaving behind everything familiar, starting over in a new city where I knew no one. But it also meant escape from the suffocating web of financial obligations my family had wrapped around me. "It's complicated," I said. "How complicated?" Mom's tone suggested that complications weren't welcome here. I took a deep breath, feeling like a man about to jump off a cliff. "They offered me a position in Denver. Regional director. It's a good opportunity." The silence in the room was deafening. Carmen's face went white, then red. "Denver?" she said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "You're thinking of moving to Denver?" "I haven't decided yet." "When would this happen?" Mom asked, her voice carefully neutral. "They want an answer by next week. If I accept, I'd need to relocate within 3 months." Carmen exploded. "You can't move to Denver. Not now. We need you here." "What you need," I said, feeling my temper finally slip, "is to figure out your own problems without bankrupting me in the process." "Bankrupting?" Derek stood up, his face flushing. "We're not asking you to go broke. We're asking you to help family in a time of crisis. A crisis you created by living beyond your means for years." "Beyond our means?" Carmen's voice hit a pitch that probably bothered dogs 3 blocks away. "We live modestly. We drive practical cars, we live in a reasonable neighborhood. You drive a BMW, a Mercedes, and Derek's weekend Jeep. Your reasonable neighborhood has houses that start at $800,000. And you send 3 kids to a private school that costs more than most people make in a year. Those are investments in our family's future. Funded by my present." Mom held up a hand, and we all fell silent. It was a gesture that had worked when we were kids, and apparently still had power over us as adults. "Marcus," she said, her voice taking on that particular tone that meant I was in serious trouble. "Are you telling me that you'd abandon your family in their time of need to chase some job opportunity?" The question was loaded with 32 years of conditioning. Good sons don't abandon family. Good sons sacrifice for the greater good. Good sons don't put their own needs first. "I'm telling you that I'm considering all my options," I said carefully. "All your options?" Mom repeated the phrase like it tasted bitter. "Let me clarify your options for you. Your sister and her family need help. You have the means to provide that help. You can either be the kind of man who steps up for family, or you can be the kind who runs away when things get difficult." "Things have been difficult for me for years," I said. "I've been stepping up constantly. Carmen's car payment, Derek's golf club membership, 3 sets of private school tuition that I somehow got roped into contributing to, your medical bills when insurance didn't cover the procedure last year. We never asked you to do those things, Carmen interrupted. You didn't have to ask. Every family dinner was a subtle hint about financial stress. Every phone call included some casual mention of bills piling up. And every time I helped, it became the new normal. That's what family does, Mom said firmly. We help each other. When exactly has this family helped me? Another silence, this one even heavier than the last. We were there for you during the divorce, Carmen said weakly. You were there to tell me I should have tried harder to make Sarah happy. You were there to suggest that maybe if I'd made more money, bought a bigger house, taken better care of myself, she wouldn't have left. We didn't say that, Derek protested. Derek, you literally told me that successful men don't get divorced. His face reddened, but he didn't deny it. Mom leaned forward in her chair. Marcus, you're clearly upset, and I understand that. Divorce is traumatic, and you're still processing those feelings. But taking your anger out on your family isn't the answer. I'm not taking anything out on anyone. I'm just tired of being the family ATM. Family ATM? Carmen's voice cracked. Is that what you think we see you as? I looked around the room, at my sister who'd barged into my home on my birthday to demand money, at Derek who'd casually suggested I had no future worth investing in, at my mother who'd just tried to emotionally manipulate me into compliance. Yes, I said quietly. That's exactly what I think. Carmen burst into tears. Not the pretty, delicate tears of movie heroines, but the ugly, snotty sobs of someone whose world was crumbling. How can you say that? She wailed. We love you. We include you in everything. The kids adore you. The kids see me as the uncle who pays for things. Emma literally just compared me to Madison's uncle who bought her a car. That's not, they don't, Carmen couldn't form a coherent sentence through her tears. Derek put his arm around his wife, shooting me a look that could have frozen fire. You're being cruel, Marcus. Carmen's emotional right now because she's scared for our family's future. Maybe she should be scared, I said. Maybe being scared will motivate you both to make some actual changes instead of expecting me to subsidize your lifestyle indefinitely. Enough. Mom's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She stood up slowly, drawing herself to her full height, and fixed me with a stare that had terrified me as a child and apparently still worked on me as an adult. Marcus James Holloway, she said, using my full name like she had when I was 8 and had broken something valuable. You will apologize to your sister right now, and then you will figure out how to help your family through this crisis. Or what? The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. In 32 years, I had never directly challenged my mother's authority. Never questioned her right to make demands. Never asked what the consequences would be if I refused to comply. Mom's face went very still. Excuse me? I said, or what? What happens if I don't apologize? What happens if I take the job in Denver? What happens if I stop paying for everyone else's choices? Then you're not the son I raised. The words hit me like a physical blow. But instead of crumbling, instead of rushing to apologize and make everything right, I felt something unexpected, relief. Maybe not, I said. Maybe the son you raised was a doormat who was so desperate for approval that he'd bankrupt himself to keep everyone else happy. Carmen's sobs got louder. Derek looked like he wanted to punch me. Mom's face was carved from stone. If you walk away from this family, Mom said, her voice deadly quiet, if you abandon us when we need you most, then don't bother coming back. Mom, Carmen started. No. Mom held up her hand again. If Marcus wants to be selfish, if he wants to put his own desires above family loyalty, then he's made his choice. But choices have consequences. I looked at the three of them, my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and saw them clearly for maybe the first time in my adult life. Carmen, who had perfected the art of emotional manipulation to fund her lifestyle. Derek, who saw me as a useful resource rather than a person. Mom, who wielded love like a weapon to control her children. And in that moment, I felt the last threads of obligation snap. You're right, I said calmly. Choices do have consequences. I walked to my kitchen and opened the laptop I kept on the counter. A few clicks brought up the job offer email I'd been staring at for weeks. Without hesitation, I typed my acceptance and hit send. Congratulations, I announced, closing the laptop. You just made my decision for me. I'll be moving to Denver in 8 weeks. The explosion that followed was spectacular. Carmen's sobs turned into wails. Derek started shouting about family loyalty and blood being thicker than water. Apparently he was a Walking Dead fan too, though he probably didn't remember that it was about zombies. Mom didn't shout, but her silence was somehow worse than the other two combined. You'll regret this, Derek said, pointing at me like a prosecutor making his closing argument. You'll be alone in Denver, no family, no support system, and you'll realize what you threw away. Maybe, I said. But I'll be alone with my own money in my own bank account, making my own decisions about my own life. Don't expect us to be here when you come crawling back, Carmen managed through her tears. I won't be coming crawling back. Mom stood up, smoothing down her skirt with the precise movements of someone holding herself together through sheer willpower. Pack up the lasagna, she told Carmen. We're leaving. Mom, you don't have to, I started. Yes, I do. Her voice was ice. I won't be a guest in the home of someone who has disowned his own family. I didn't disown anyone. You chose money over family. You chose selfishness over love. You chose to abandon people who need you. She picked up her purse and headed for the door. That sounds like disowning to me. Carmen and Derek gathered their things and their children, who had reappeared from the kitchen looking confused and slightly scared. Emma kept glancing between her parents and me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Uncle Marcus? Sophie asked as they headed for the door. Are you really moving away? Yes, sweetheart, I said, kneeling down to her level. I got a new job in Colorado. Will you still visit us? The question hit me harder than anything else that had happened. Sophie was 7 years old. She didn't understand the complex web of financial dependence and emotional manipulation that had brought us to this point. She just knew her uncle was leaving. I don't know, I said honestly. Carmen snatched Sophie's hand and pulled her toward the door. Don't make promises you won't keep, Marcus. And then they were gone, leaving me alone in my living room with the silence ringing in my ears. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides with a spoon. I made myself a sandwich and tried to watch the rest of the Lakers game, but my heart wasn't in it. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call Carmen and apologize, to take it all back, to offer them the money and beg forgiveness. But I didn't. Instead, I spent the evening going through my finances with the methodical precision of an accountant preparing for an audit. What I found was simultaneously horrifying and liberating. Over the past 3 years, I had paid $67,200 toward Carmen and Derek's mortgage, $28,800 in car payments for vehicles I didn't drive, $15,600 for private school contributions, $8,400 in utilities for houses I didn't live in, $12,000 in miscellaneous emergencies that ranged from Derek's root canal to Emma's orthodontic work. That was $132,000. More than most people made in 2 years. Money that could have been my down payment on a house, my emergency fund, my retirement contributions. Money that had evaporated into other people's lives while I convinced myself I was being a good son and brother. I opened my banking app and started making changes. First, I removed my name from Carmen and Derek's mortgage account. Then I canceled the automatic payments for their cars. The utilities took a bit more work, but within an hour, I had disconnected myself from every financial obligation that wasn't actually mine. When I was done, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks and had finally been allowed to set it down. I went to bed that night with my phone on silent, expecting the storm that would come when my family discovered what I'd done. I woke up to 59 missed calls. 59. I counted them twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Carmen had called 32 times. Derek had called 18 times. Mom had called 9 times. There were also 17 text messages, 4 voicemails, and 3 emails. I made coffee before I opened any of them. The text messages were a journey through the 5 stages of grief, compressed into digital form. They started with confusion. Marcus, there seems to be a problem with the mortgage payment. Moved through anger, how could you do this to us? Attempted bargaining, if you change your mind about Denver, we can work something out. Slid into depression, the kids are asking why you hate them, and ended with acceptance. Fine. We'll figure this out ourselves. The voicemails were worse. Carmen's voice, shrill with panic. Derek, trying to sound authoritative while clearly falling apart. Mom, coldly informing me that I had burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. The emails were formal, written in the tone of lawyers delivering ultimatums. They detailed the financial hardship my sudden abandonment would cause. They questioned my mental health, my moral character, and my fitness to be part of a loving family. They suggested I seek professional help for my obvious emotional instability. I deleted them all and went to work. My boss, Jennifer Martinez, called me into her office around 10 a.m. She was a small woman with an MBA from Wharton and the negotiating skills of a shark. I got your acceptance email, she said without preamble. I'm assuming you're sure about this decision, because I've already started the paperwork. I'm sure. She studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd spent years reading people for a living. Family emergency? Something like that. Well, whatever it is, I think you're making the right choice. Denver's operations need someone they can trust, and you've earned this opportunity. She slid a folder across her desk. Relocation package details. Housing allowance, moving expenses, temporary accommodations while you apartment hunt. We want to make this as smooth as possible. I thumbed through the paperwork, my spirits lifting with each page. It wasn't just a job, It was a complete life restart, funded by the company and 3,000 miles away from the wreckage of my family relationships. When do I start? Officially? January 15th. But they want you there by the first week of January to get settled. Think you can make that happen? Absolutely. That evening, I started the process of untangling my life from my family's. I called my mortgage company to remove Carmen and Derek as authorized users on my account. I contacted the utility companies to cancel service transfers I'd never authorized. I spoke with the private school to remove myself from the list of approved payers for tuition. Each phone call was like cutting a rope that had been binding me in place. The hardest part was dealing with my mother's house. 3 years ago, when she'd needed a new roof and HVAC system, I'd co-signed a home equity loan to cover the costs. It had seemed like a reasonable thing to do. She was my mother, the house was her primary asset, and I trusted her to make the payments. What I discovered, when I called the bank to check on the loan status, was that she'd been making only the minimum payments while using the extra borrowing capacity for other expenses. The loan balance had actually increased over the past year. Mr. Holloway, the loan officer explained, your mother has used the line of credit for approximately $38,000 in additional borrowing. As a cosigner, you're equally responsible for the full balance. I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at the paperwork and doing calculations in my head. If I walked away from the co-signature, Mom's credit would be destroyed when she inevitably defaulted. The house would go into foreclosure. She'd lose the only asset she had. If I stayed on the loan, I'd be tied to her financial decisions indefinitely. Every late payment would hit my credit. Every additional borrowing would become my responsibility. I called my lawyer. Marcus, I have to ask, David Chen said after I'd explained the situation. Are you sure about this? Legally, you have options, but family relationships don't recover from financial nuclear strikes. I'm not nuking anything, I said. I'm just refusing to be collateral damage anymore. All right. Give me a few days to research your options. But I'll warn you up front, extricating yourself from family financial entanglements is complicated, expensive, and usually permanent. Permanent sounds good right now. That weekend, I drove to Mom's house for what I expected would be our final conversation. She lived in a craftsman bungalow in an older neighborhood, the kind of place that looked charming but required constant maintenance. I'd spent countless weekends over the years helping with repairs, yard work, and home improvements that were beyond her budget. She was waiting for me on the front porch, rocking in the chair I'd bought her for Mother's Day 2 years earlier. I wondered when you'd show up, she said without looking at me. We need to talk about the house. I figured. She kept rocking, her eyes fixed on the street. Carmen told me you cut off their utilities. I stopped paying bills that weren't mine to pay. Same thing. I sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Mom, why didn't you tell me you'd borrowed more money on the house? You didn't ask. I co-signed the loan. I had a right to know. You had access to the account information if you wanted to check. The circular logic was maddening. That's not how co-signing works. You're supposed to communicate about major financial decisions. Like you communicated about taking the Denver job? That's different. Is it? She finally looked at me, and I was surprised to see that her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. You made a decision that affects the whole family without consulting anyone. My job doesn't affect the whole family. Your money does. There it was. The truth at the center of everything. My money affected the whole family because they'd structured their lives around accessing it. That's the problem, Mom. My money shouldn't be a factor in anyone else's decisions. It's not your money, she said quietly. It's family money. Everything we have, we share. That's what family means. No, it's what codependence means. And I'm done with it. We sat in silence for a while, watching cars drive past and neighbors tend their gardens. Normal people living normal lives, making their own choices and dealing with their own consequences. Your father would be disappointed, Mom said eventually. The blow landed exactly where she'd aimed it. Dad had died when I was 15, and I'd spent the last 17 years trying to be the man he never got the chance to become. Patient, responsible, always there for family. But sitting on that porch, I realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. Dad never had the chance to become anything. He died young, leaving behind a wife and 3 kids and a pile of debt. Mom had spent the next 2 decades mythologizing him, turning him into a saint who would have solved all their problems if he'd just lived long enough. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he'd be proud that I finally learned to stand up for myself. Standing up for yourself, she repeated. Is that what this is? Yes. And abandoning your family is just a side effect? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries, she spat the word like it tasted bitter. That's what your generation calls selfishness, isn't it? I stood up, dusting off my jeans. I'm going to have my lawyer contact you about the loan. We'll figure out a way to transfer it entirely into your name, or if that's not possible, we'll discuss other options. Other options like foreclosure? Other options like downsizing to something you can actually afford. She stopped rocking and fixed me with a stare that could have melted steel. This house is all I have left of your father. Dad's been gone for 17 years, Mom. You can't live in a shrine forever. Get off my property. Mom, get off my property and don't come back. I walked to my car, my hands shaking with adrenaline and grief. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw her in my rearview mirror, still sitting in that rocking chair, staring at nothing. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and preparation for my move. My lawyer managed to negotiate a transfer of the home equity loan entirely into Mom's name, though it required her to prove sufficient income and assets to qualify. She managed it, barely, by taking out a reverse mortgage that would eat up the house's equity but keep her in place until she died. Carmen and Derek's financial crisis became a neighborhood scandal when they were forced to put their house on the market and pull the kids from private school. Derek took a job with a pharmaceutical company that required frequent travel, and Carmen went back to work as a substitute teacher. The luxury cars were traded for practical sedans, and the family downsized to a rental house in a less prestigious school district. I heard about all of this through mutual friends and social media, not from my family directly. We'd maintained radio silence since that day on Mom's porch. The hardest part was Christmas. I'd always been the one to organize family gatherings, book restaurants for holiday dinners, and coordinate gift exchanges. Without me, apparently, those traditions simply ceased to exist. I spent Christmas Day in my empty condo, packing boxes and watching old movies, trying to convince myself I wasn't lonely. I was, though. Desperately, achingly lonely. But I was also free. On January 3rd, I loaded everything I owned into a moving truck and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. The drive to Denver took 2 days, and I used the time to decompress from 3 decades of family obligation. Colorado was beautiful in a way that took my breath away. Mountains that stretched to the horizon, air so clean it hurt to breathe, and a sense of possibility that I hadn't felt in years. My new apartment was tiny but entirely mine, with no co-signers, no authorized users, and no monthly obligations to anyone but myself. The job was everything Jennifer had promised and more. I was managing a team of 12 IT professionals, overseeing system upgrades for a company with offices in 6 states, and making more money than I'd ever imagined possible. More importantly, I was respected for my expertise, not seen as a resource to be exploited. 3 months into my new life, I got an unexpected visitor. I was working late in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Marcus? There's a woman here to see you. Says she's your sister?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from Carmen since the day I'd cut off their payments, and I'd honestly hoped I never would again. "Send her in," I said, steeling myself for whatever fresh manipulation she'd devised. Carmen looked different. Thinner, more tired, wearing clothes that were nice but not expensive. Her hair was shorter, and she wasn't wearing the designer jewelry that had been her signature for years. "Hello, Marcus." "Carmen." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "This is unexpected." She sat down carefully, looking around my office with obvious surprise. "This is impressive. I knew you'd gotten a promotion, but I didn't realize it was this significant." "It's been good to me." An awkward silence stretched between us. I could see her working up to whatever she'd come to say, trying on different approaches like outfits. "How did you even find me?" I asked. "I hired a private investigator," she said it matter-of-factly, like it was a normal thing to do. "You hired a private investigator to track down your brother? You changed your phone number, closed your social media accounts, and didn't leave a forwarding address. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to respect my decision to start over somewhere new." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Marcus, we need to talk." "About what?" "About what happened. About the things we said. About the way we treated you." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She looked sincere, but Carmen had always been good at looking sincere when she wanted something. "Okay," I said. "Talk." She took a deep breath. "You were right. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, that wasn't one of them." "About what, specifically?" "About everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "About the way we used you. About the way we took your generosity for granted. About the way we made you feel like a walking ATM instead of a person." I waited. Carmen had always been dramatic, and I wasn't ready to believe this performance was genuine. "When you cut off the payments," she continued, "our world fell apart in about 48 hours. The mortgage company called first, then the car dealerships, then the school. Derek and I had to sit down and actually look at our finances for the first time in years, and do you know what we discovered?" "What?" "We discovered that we'd been living like millionaires on a middle-class income, and the only reason it worked was because you were subsidizing our entire lifestyle." She laughed bitterly. "Derek calculated it out. Over the past 3 years, you'd essentially been our third income. We were living off your money and calling it family support. And that surprised you? It should have, but honestly? No. Deep down, I think we knew. We just didn't want to admit it because admitting it would mean admitting we were parasites. The word hung in the air between us. Parasites. It was harsher than I would have used, but it was accurate. So what changed? I asked. Losing the house was the wake-up call. Having to tell the kids they were switching schools, having to explain why we couldn't afford gymnastics and lacrosse and piano lessons anymore. Watching Emma cry because she'd have to leave all her friends in her senior year. Carmen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Derek and I had our first honest conversation about money in probably 10 years, and it was horrifying. How so? We'd never learned to budget. Never learned to live within our means. We just assumed that between Derek's salary and your contributions, we could afford whatever we wanted. When your money disappeared, we realized we had no idea how to be adults. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but I pushed it down. And Derek? How's he handling the reality check? Carmen's face darkened. Derek's having what I guess you'd call a midlife crisis. He's angry all the time, blaming everyone but himself for our situation. He keeps talking about suing you for some kind of financial abandonment, even though our lawyer told him that's not a real thing. He wants to sue me? He wants someone to blame other than himself. The job he lost? Turns out he'd been phoning it in for years, showing up late, leaving early, letting his assistants do most of the actual work while he played golf with clients. When the layoffs came, he was the obvious choice. This was news to me. Derek had always presented himself as indispensable at work, the kind of employee companies couldn't function without. So what's he doing now? Working for a pharmaceutical company, like I said. It's good, honest work, but it requires actual effort and accountability. He's struggling with that. She paused. We're in counseling now. Marriage counseling and financial counseling. That's good. The marriage counselor asked us to make lists of everyone we'd hurt with our financial irresponsibility. Your name was at the top of both lists. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was vindicated, finally, someone was acknowledging what I'd been through. But part of me just felt sad for all the years we'd lost to this dysfunction. What about the kids? I asked. That's been the hardest part, Carmen said, her voice getting quiet. Emma's been angry at everyone, at me and Derek for lying to her about our financial situation, at you for abandoning us, at the world for being unfair. She's seeing a therapist too. And Tyler and Sophie? Tyler's adjusting better than expected. It turns out he actually likes public school better, more kids, better sports programs, less pressure to be perfect all the time. Sophie keeps asking when Uncle Marcus is coming to visit, and I don't know what to tell her. The mention of Sophie hit me harder than I expected. She was the innocent in all of this, too young to understand the adult complications that had torn our family apart. Carmen, I said carefully, why are you here? What do you want from me? She looked me straight in the eye. I want to apologize. Not because I want something from you, not because I'm hoping you'll bail us out again, but because you deserve an apology from someone who treated you terribly for years and never acknowledged it. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. All I saw was exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. Okay, I said. I'm listening. I'm sorry for treating you like a bank account instead of a brother. I'm sorry for letting my kids think of you as the uncle who pays for things instead of the uncle who loves them. I'm sorry for that horrible scene on your birthday, and for letting Derek say those awful things about your divorce and your life. I'm sorry for not standing up to Mom when she made those threats about disowning you. She paused, gathering herself. Most of all, I'm sorry for taking advantage of your generosity for so long that we forgot it was generosity. We started thinking of your money as our right, and that was inexcusable. The apology was more thorough and honest than anything I'd expected from Carmen. But apologies don't undo years of damage. Thank you for saying that, I said. It means something to hear you acknowledge what happened. But it doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, the tick of the clock on my wall. I know you don't owe me anything, Carmen said eventually. But I was hoping maybe we could start over. Not financially, I'm not asking for money, and I never will again. I mean as siblings. As family. Carmen, I know it's a lot to ask. I know we burned those bridges pretty thoroughly. But Sophie asks about you every day, and Emma's starting to realize that maybe you weren't the villain in this story, and Tyler keeps talking about visiting Colorado for skiing. She took a shaky breath. We miss you, Marcus. I miss you. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the anger and hurt and financial manipulation, I missed them too. I missed Sunday dinners and birthday parties and holiday traditions. I missed being Uncle Marcus, even if the role had been corrupted by money. But missing someone and trusting them again are different things entirely. I don't know, I said honestly. I've built a good life here. I'm happy in ways I didn't even know were possible. The idea of opening myself up to all that dysfunction again. I understand. And I'm not asking you to come back to the way things were. I'm asking if maybe there's a way to move forward. What would that look like? I don't know. Maybe phone calls sometimes? Maybe video chats with the kids? Maybe if you ever come back to visit, we could grab coffee and see how it goes? It was a reasonable request. More reasonable than I'd expected from Carmen, honestly. What about Derek? Her face tightened. Derek's not ready for this conversation yet. He's still in the anger phase of grief, still blaming everyone but himself. But I'm hoping that will change as he adjusts to our new reality. And Mom? Mom. She's convinced that you've joined some kind of cult that teaches children to abandon their parents. She alternates between fury and heartbreak, and she's not ready to admit she might have been wrong about anything. I almost laughed. A cult that teaches financial boundaries. If only such a thing existed, they'd have more members than they could handle. Carmen, I need you to understand something, I said. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I've learned things about myself, about healthy relationships, about what I will and won't accept from people who claim to love me. If we're going to have any kind of relationship going forward, it has to be based on mutual respect, not on what I can provide for your family. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't just about money. It's about the way you talk to me, the way you dismissed my feelings, the way you made me feel guilty for having boundaries. It's about the fundamental disrespect you showed for me as a person. She nodded, tears starting to flow again. I know we treated you horribly, and I know sorry doesn't fix it. But I'm hoping maybe time and changed behavior might start to heal some of the damage. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone who was trying to grow, trying to change, trying to become a better person. It didn't erase the years of damage, but it was something. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all I can ask for. She stood to leave, then hesitated at the door. Marcus? For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. This life you've built, this job, the courage it took to walk away from all of us, I'm proud of you for putting yourself first for once. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out the window at the Rocky Mountains and thinking about family and forgiveness and second chances. 3 months later, I got a package in the mail. Inside was a hand-drawn card from Sophie, featuring stick figures of our family with "I miss Uncle Marcus" written in purple crayon. There was also a letter from Emma, written in the careful cursive of someone who'd been forced to think about her words. Dear Uncle Marcus, it read, Mom explained some things to me about why you moved away, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for how we treated you. I didn't understand before that you were paying for our school and our house and stuff. I thought that was just normal, but Mom says it wasn't normal and it wasn't fair to you. I'm sorry we made you feel bad. I hope Colorado is nice. Maybe someday I can visit and you can teach me to ski. Love, Emma. That night, I called Carmen for the first time in almost a year. Marcus? She sounded shocked to hear my voice. Hi, Carmen. I got the kids' cards. They'll be so excited you called. Sophie's been carrying around a picture of you for months. How are things going? Better. Harder, but better. We're learning how to live on our actual income, and it's amazing how much money we have when we're not trying to keep up appearances. Derek's actually starting to like his job, turns out he's good at it when he actually tries. And the marriage? We're working on it. Some days are better than others, but we're both committed to figuring it out. We talked for an hour, carefully navigating around the landmines of our shared history while trying to build something new. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, that was gone forever. But it might, someday, be something healthier. A year later, Carmen and the kids came to visit Colorado for a long weekend. Derek stayed home, still not ready to face me, but the kids were fascinated by the mountains and the snow in their uncle's new life. We went skiing at Breckenridge, where Tyler turned out to be a natural and Sophie spent most of her time making snow angels. Emma, now a freshman at the local state university after getting a scholarship, peppered me with questions about my job and my life and whether I was lonely. Sometimes, I admitted as we sat in the lodge after a day on the slopes. But lonely isn't the same as alone, and alone isn't the same as abandoned. I think I'm starting to understand the difference, Emma said. That night, as I tucked Sophie into the pull-out couch in my living room, she looked up at me with 7-year-old seriousness. Uncle Marcus? Are you still mad at us? I was never mad at you, sweetheart. I was mad at some choices the grown-ups made, but I was never mad at you. Good. Because I love you even when you live far away. I love you too, Sophie. Distance doesn't change that. 2 years after that first visit, Derek finally called me. The conversation was awkward and stilted, full of long pauses and carefully chosen words, but it was a start. He apologized, not as thoroughly as Carmen had, but with what seemed like genuine remorse. He thanked me for not giving up on his family entirely, even after they'd given up on me. We're not close now, and probably never will be again. But we're civil, and that's enough. Mom and I still don't speak. According to Carmen, she's softened somewhat with age, but she's never admitted that her ultimatum was wrong or that I had the right to set boundaries with my own money. She's remarried now, a widower from her church who has his own pension and doesn't need financial support from his stepchildren. Carmen says she seems happy, and I'm glad for her, but I'm not ready to open that door again. Maybe someday. Maybe not. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, and love doesn't require sacrifice of your own well-being. These days, I have a life I actually enjoy. I've been promoted twice since moving to Colorado, and I'm being considered for a vice president position that would put me in charge of IT operations for the entire Western region. I bought a house with a view of the mountains and a garage for the motorcycle I finally bought myself after years of wanting one. I'm dating someone, Sarah, a software engineer who understands boundaries and has her own career and her own money. We talk about the future sometimes, but we're in no hurry. We've both learned the difference between being alone and being lonely, and we choose to be together because we want to be, not because we need to be. My family visits once a year now, and I visit them every other year. It's not the relationship we had before, but it's the relationship we can sustain without anyone losing themselves in the process. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd given them the $200,000. Would it have bought me another year of being included, of being seen as the good son and brother? Or would it have just raised the stakes for the next crisis, the next demand, the next test of my loyalty? I think I know the answer, and I'm grateful every day that I never found out for sure. The truth is, losing my family, temporarily, as it turned out, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover who I was when I wasn't defined by what I could provide for other people. It taught me the difference between love and manipulation, between generosity and exploitation, between family loyalty and family dysfunction. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses, even if they hate you for it. Especially if they hate you for it. I still get calls sometimes, friends of the family who want to mediate, distant relatives who think I should just forgive and forget, well-meaning people who believe blood is always thicker than water. I listen politely and then explain that forgiveness is a process, not an event, and that healthy relationships require ongoing effort from all parties involved. Some people understand. Others think I'm cold and unforgiving. I've learned to live with both reactions. My phone is buzzing now as I finish writing this story in my favorite coffee shop in downtown Denver. It's a text from Sophie, who's 10 now and learning to text on her mother's old phone. Uncle Marcus. I made the honor roll. Can I tell you about it on Sunday when we video chat? I smile and text back, absolutely, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. And I am proud, of Sophie's achievement, of Emma's growth into a thoughtful young adult, of Tyler's development into a confident teenager, of Carmen's journey toward becoming a better person, even of Derek's slow progress toward accountability. But mostly, I'm proud of myself for learning that love doesn't require martyrdom, that family doesn't require sacrifice of your own well-being, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who need you to stay small so they can feel big. 3 years ago, my family asked me to choose between my money and their love, not realizing they'd structured that choice to be impossible. Love that requires payment isn't love, it's a transaction. I chose myself instead, and discovered that real love was still there, waiting on the other side of all that artificial urgency and manufactured crisis. It just took some time, and some very firm boundaries, to find it again. The mountains outside my window are covered in snow, and I have plans to go skiing this weekend with Sarah and her kids from her first marriage. They call me almost stepdad Marcus, which makes me laugh every time. It's a family I chose rather than inherited, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. It's not the family I expected to have at 35, but it's the family I wanted without knowing I wanted it. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not paying anyone's bills but my own. Story 3.
My boyfriend of 4 years spoke in Korean on the phone right in front of me, not realizing I'd become fluent during our relationship. He laughed as he told his mother, "She's paid off all my student loans. Now I just need to marry her and get my green card, then I'll dump her." His mother replied, "She's so stupid," thinking my son could ever be her soulmate. I just stayed quiet and smiled politely as if I hadn't understood a word. That was yesterday. Last night, I posted the entire translated conversation on TikTok. Within 4 hours, it had over 1 million views. By midnight, someone very special was at our door to get her. Look, I need to tell someone this story because I'm still shaking from everything that happened. My hands keep trembling as I type this, and I've checked the locks on my door 17 times since this morning. But you need to hear this from the beginning because what I thought was a simple case of discovering my boyfriend was using me turned into something so much bigger and more terrifying than I ever imagined. 4 years ago, I met Jin at a Starbucks near NYU's campus. Total cliché meet cute situation. I was struggling with my ancient laptop that kept freezing during finals week, cursing at the blue screen of death, when this gorgeous guy with perfect skin and that effortless Korean style slid into the chair across from me. "Need help with that?" he asked, gesturing to my computer with a shy smile that made my heart skip. Within minutes, he had my laptop running smoothly again, and we were talking about Korean dramas. I'd been completely obsessed with Korean culture since high school, started with BTS, fell hard for Goblin, then spiraled into Korean movies, food, language apps, the whole 9 yards. When this beautiful man with cheekbones that could cut glass started flirting with me while discussing the cinematography of Parasite, I genuinely thought I had found my soulmate. Jin seemed like everything I dreamed of. Computer science grad student at Columbia, quiet but intense in that brooding K-drama lead way, and he was genuinely excited to share his culture with me. Within 2 weeks, we were practically living together. He'd cook these elaborate Korean meals in my tiny apartment kitchen, teach me random phrases while we watched movies, laugh affectionately when I butchered pronunciations. I thought it was the most romantic thing in the world how he'd slip into Korean when he got excited or frustrated, this musical language flowing from his lips like poetry. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I started learning Korean in secret. First with Duolingo and YouTube videos, then I hired a private tutor, this sweet elderly Korean woman named Mrs. Park who lived in Koreatown and charged $20 an hour for lessons. I told myself it would be the most romantic surprise ever. Picture it, our 2-year anniversary, me suddenly understanding every word of his grandmother's stories, watching his face light up when I could finally communicate with his family without subtitles or translation. But I kept it completely secret. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I told Jin I had yoga classes when I was actually cramming verb conjugations and memorizing honorifics. The learning curve was absolutely brutal, Korean sentence structure made my brain feel like it was melting, and the honorific system seemed designed by someone who enjoyed watching foreigners suffer. But I was so motivated by love, you know? Every tiny breakthrough felt like I was getting closer to Jin's heart, to truly understanding the man I was falling for. By our first anniversary, I could follow basic conversations. By year 2, I was understanding most of what Jin said when he talked to his family on the phone. By year 3, I was essentially fluent, though I kept pretending to be completely clueless because I was still planning that perfect romantic reveal moment. Meanwhile, our relationship was getting more serious in all the ways that mattered. Jin moved in with me after his studio lease expired, my place was bigger anyway, and why waste money on 2 rents when we spent every night together? I helped him through some financial rough patches because his student visa severely limited his work hours, and grad school expenses were crushing him. When he stressed about loan payments keeping him up at night, I offered to help without hesitation. When he needed money for thesis research that his department wouldn't fund, I covered it gladly. When he mentioned casually how much simpler life would be with a green card, I started researching marriage-based immigration procedures because I was already planning our future together. I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful and permanent. Looking back now with painful clarity, I can see every single red flag I willfully ignored. How he never wanted to video chat with his family when I was in the room, always stepping onto the balcony or into the bedroom for privacy. How he'd get these strange phone calls at bizarre hours, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., and always claimed they were family emergencies back in Seoul. How he never talked about specific plans for me to meet his parents, just vague someday when the timing is right promises that somehow never materialized despite 4 years together. How he'd sometimes slip and use Chinese curse words when he stubbed his toe or got frustrated, then quickly cover with a laugh and claim he'd picked them up from international students. But I explained everything away. I was so completely blinded by what I thought was love, and honestly, by my K-pop-fueled fantasy of Korean romance, that I turned every warning sign into evidence of how special and mysterious my boyfriend was. The secrecy meant he was protecting me from complicated family dynamics. The late-night calls proved how devoted he was to his loved ones back home. The occasional Chinese words just showed how cosmopolitan and educated he was. I was such an idiot. Then came yesterday afternoon, and everything shattered. I was in our kitchen, my kitchen, I now realize, making dinner around 5 p.m. when Jin's phone rang with that familiar Samsung ringtone. His mother, calling at her usual time, 7 p.m. Seoul time, 6 a.m. New York time. I'd overheard these conversations hundreds of times over 4 years, understanding more and more as my Korean skills improved, but always pretending complete ignorance while I cooked or folded laundry nearby. But yesterday's call was different from the moment Jin answered. Instead of his usual respectful "안녕하세요, 어머니," hello, mother, he picked up with a casual, almost cocky tone, "Yeah, it's going exactly like we planned." I froze at the stove, wooden spoon dripping marinara sauce onto the floor. "She finally paid off the rest of my student loans yesterday," he continued in rapid Korean, and his voice carried this triumphant, almost predatory satisfaction I'd never heard before. $28,000. Just transferred it without even questioning the amount. My heart started hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I forced myself to keep stirring the pasta, to keep breathing normally. His mother's voice crackled through the phone speaker, tinny but clear, perfect. "So how much longer do you have to keep this charade going?" The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered against the pot. "Not much longer," Jin replied, and I could hear him settling into our living room couch, my couch that I'd saved for 6 months to buy. I just need to get her to marry me so I can start the green card process. Once that's approved, I can dump her and come home. 6 months, maybe 8 at most. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles went white, my vision tunneling as blood rushed from my head. And she has no idea? His mother asked, sounding delighted. She's really that gullible? They both laughed. Actually laughed. Amini, you should see her, Jin said, and his tone was so cruel, so mocking, that it made my stomach lurch. She gets this dreamy, pathetic look whenever I speak Korean around her. Like she thinks it's the most romantic thing in the world. She has absolutely no clue what I'm actually saying. What about when you told her you loved her? That was the funniest part. Yesterday she said she thinks we're soulmates destined to be together forever. He pronounced the English word soulmates with such vicious mockery that I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. She's been doing all the immigration paperwork research for me, paying for everything, planning our whole future. She even bought me that expensive winter coat last month because she said I looked cold. American women are so naive about Korean men, his mother agreed, and I could practically hear her shaking her head. They watch too many K-dramas and think we're all romantic princes waiting to sweep them off their feet. It's pathetic how easy they are to manipulate once you figure out their fantasies, Jin continued. Cook them some Korean food, teach them a few cute phrases, act mysterious and brooding, they'll hand over their bank account information. I stood there in my own kitchen, listening to the man I'd loved for 4 years describe exactly how he'd been using me, and I felt something break inside my chest. Not just my heart, something deeper, more fundamental. My sense of reality, maybe. My ability to trust my own judgment. But here's the thing that surprises me even now, I didn't scream. I didn't throw the pot of pasta at the wall or storm into the living room to confront him. Maybe I was in shock, or maybe some survival instinct kicked in and told me I needed to be smart about this. I finished making dinner. When Jin hung up the phone and wandered into the kitchen, I smiled and asked about his day like nothing had happened. When he switched to English and told me his mom had been asking about wedding planning ideas and how excited his family was to meet me, I nodded enthusiastically and said I couldn't wait to be part of his family. The performance was Oscar-worthy, honestly. That night, while Jin slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about his green card and plane ticket home, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and planning. Not revenge, exactly. Something more like justice. See, I'd been recording our conversations lately. Not intentionally or creepily, I'd just gotten into the habit of starting voice memos on my phone to remind myself of grocery lists or work tasks, then forgetting to turn them off. My phone had been charging on the kitchen counter yesterday afternoon, and I'd started a memo around 4 p.m. to remind myself to buy more coffee. It had recorded everything. Every laugh, every cruel word, every detail of their 4-year plan to use me for money and legal status. By 3 a.m., I knew exactly what I was going to do. I spent the morning editing the audio file, adding English subtitles, and crafting the perfect TikTok post. My account had about 15,000 followers, mostly people who followed my Korean learning journey and K-drama reviews. My bio mentioned my language studies, so my audience knew I could translate accurately. The video was simple, me looking directly at the camera, eyes red-rimmed but determined, with text overlay that read, POV, your boyfriend doesn't know you became fluent in Korean during your relationship. Yesterday I understood everything. Then I played the audio clip with full English subtitles, every damning word translated perfectly. I posted it at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday, right during lunch hour for maximum engagement potential. The response was immediate and explosive. Comments started pouring in within minutes, outrage, support, people sharing their own stories of being used and manipulated. But I had no idea what I'd unleashed. 1 hour, 50,000 views. 2 hours, 200,000 views. 4 hours, over 1 million views, and climbing so fast my phone couldn't keep up with the notifications. The video was being screen recorded, shared across every social media platform, translated into multiple languages. Hashtag Korean boyfriend scam started trending on Twitter. TikTok's algorithm had grabbed my story and was showing it to everyone, everywhere. Comments flooded in faster than I could read them. Other women sharing similar stories of being targeted by men who exploited their cultural interests. Korean American users expressing outrage and embarrassment about the stereotypes being reinforced. Dating advice accounts stitching my video with their own commentary about red flags and love bombing. But around hour 6, I got a comment that made my blood run cold. It was from an account with no profile picture, just a string of numbers for a username, 847,392,010. The comment was simple and terrifying: this man is not who he claims to be. You need to check your DMs immediately. You may be in danger. My hands were shaking as I opened the direct message. Emma, my name is Agent Sarah Kim with the FBI. The man you know as Jin Park is actually Li Wei, a Chinese national who's been running sophisticated marriage fraud operations for the past 5 years. You need to contact me immediately. Do not let him know you've seen this message. Your safety may depend on it. The message included a phone number and instructions to call from somewhere private, away from Jin. I stared at my phone screen, reading the message over and over, trying to process what it meant. FBI? Chinese national? Marriage fraud operations? Jin was still at Columbia, wouldn't be home for hours. I grabbed my keys and drove to a parking garage 3 blocks away, hands trembling as I dialed the number. Agent Kim, came the crisp, professional voice. This is Emma Chen. You sent me a message about my boyfriend? Miss Chen, thank you for calling. Are you somewhere safe where you can talk freely? Yes, I'm in my car. What's going on? I don't understand. The man living with you is not Jin Park. His real name is Li Wei, he's 32 years old, and he's a Chinese citizen who entered the US on a fraudulent student visa 3 years ago. He's been systematically targeting American women who have demonstrated interest in Korean culture. The parking garage felt like it was spinning around me. That's impossible, I whispered. He speaks perfect Korean. He knows the culture, the history, the food. He's told me stories about growing up in Seoul. Miss Chen, Li Wei spent 18 months in South Korea specifically preparing for this operation. He learned the language, studied the culture, even had minor plastic surgery to enhance certain features that would appeal to his target demographic. Target demographic? Educated, financially stable American women between ages 22 to 35 who have expressed public interest in Korean culture through social media, dating profiles, or community involvement. I thought about my Instagram posts from Korean restaurants, my Spotify playlists full of K-pop, my dating profile that mentioned loving Korean dramas. You're his 4th victim that we know of, Agent Kim continued. The previous 3 women lost a combined total of over $120,000 before we caught on to his pattern. 4 victims? The words came out as barely a whisper. We've been tracking him for 11 months, but he's been careful. Always uses different identities, different backstories. Your viral video gave us the break we needed. He got careless, revealed specific details about his timeline and methods. Agent Kim's voice softened slightly. Miss Chen, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask, has he ever mentioned plans to travel or seemed anxious about your relationship timeline? Has he pressured you about marriage recently? I thought about Jin's increasing mentions of wanting to get married soon, his casual questions about how long green card processing takes, his suggestion last week that we should elope instead of planning a big wedding. He's been pushing for us to get married quickly, I admitted. He said he wanted to start our life together officially, that waiting was just wasting time. Miss Chen, based on the timeline he discussed with his handler yesterday, we believe he's planning to disappear within the next few weeks. Probably right after securing marriage documents. Handler? The woman he called wasn't his mother. She's part of a larger operation that specifically targets women like you. They have an entire network, people who scout potential victims through social media, others who provide false documentation, others who create elaborate backstories and cultural training. I felt like I was going to be sick. How many people are involved in this? We believe at least 15 people in this particular cell, possibly more. Miss Chen, I need to ask you to do something that's going to be very difficult. What? We need you to act normal when he comes home tonight. Don't let him suspect that you know anything. We're going to wire you with recording equipment, and we need you to get him to confess details about the operation. You want me to go home and pretend everything's fine with a man who's been lying to me for 4 years? I know it's terrifying. But Miss Chen, your cooperation could help us shut down this entire network and prevent dozens of other women from being victimized. I sat in that parking garage for another hour, listening to Agent Kim explain the scope of the operation, the sophistication of the fraud, the careful psychological manipulation designed to exploit cultural fetishization and romantic fantasies. By the time I hung up, I felt like I was living in someone else's life. Driving home felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same, but nothing was real anymore. The apartment I'd shared with Jin for 2 years, the photos of us together, the Korean cookbooks he'd bought me, all of it was part of an elaborate lie. Jin was in the kitchen when I got home, humming while he cooked dinner. The same man who'd held me through food poisoning last month, who'd surprised me with tickets to see BTS, who'd told me he loved me every single day for 4 years. Except he wasn't that man at all. Hey, beautiful, he called out as I walked in, and his smile was so warm, so genuine looking, that I almost started crying right there. I made your favorite, bulgogi with extra garlic. That's so sweet, I managed, hanging up my keys with hands that shook only slightly. How was your day? Long lecture about database architecture. But Professor Kim said my thesis proposal is looking good. He wrapped his arms around me from behind as I pretended to check the mail. How was your day? You seem a little tense. 4 years of lies, and he was still performing perfectly. Just tired from work, I said, leaning back against his chest because that's what I always did. But I'm excited for dinner. We ate at our kitchen table like we had hundreds of times before. Jin told me about his classes, asked about my day, mentioned that his mother had called again and was excited about meeting me soon. Every word was poison wrapped in honey. After dinner, He settled on the couch with his laptop while I cleaned dishes, and I knew Agent Kim would be calling soon with instructions for tomorrow's wire setup. But as I watched Jin scrolling through what I now knew was probably not actually social media, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. If he'd been lying about everything for 4 years, if he was part of some sophisticated criminal network, if he'd been planning to disappear once he got what he wanted. What would he do if he found out I knew? Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Kim, set up tomorrow at 2 p.m. Location TBD. Do not bring your phone or anything that might be tracked. I deleted the message and tried to act normal, but Jin looked up from his laptop with a frown. Everything okay? You've been checking your phone a lot tonight. Just work emails, I said quickly. You know how demanding my boss gets. He studied my face for a moment longer than felt comfortable, then nodded and returned to his screen. That night, lying in bed next to a man whose real name I didn't even know, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything. The man breathing softly beside me had systematically destroyed my ability to trust my own judgment. Every sweet moment, every I love you, every shared laugh had been calculated manipulation. But the scariest part was how good he was at it. Even knowing everything I knew, part of me still wanted to believe it had been real. Around 2 a.m., Jin's phone rang. He answered on the second ring, voice instantly alert despite having been asleep moments before. He spoke in rapid Chinese. Not Korean. Chinese. I lay perfectly still, breathing evenly, pretending to be asleep while he had a tense, whispered conversation in a language I didn't understand. But I caught a few English words scattered throughout: FBI, video, timeline, extraction. When he hung up, he didn't go back to sleep. He lay there in the dark, and I could feel his tension radiating through the mattress. After about 20 minutes, he got up quietly and went to the bathroom. I heard him moving around, opening drawers, running water. When he came back to bed, he smelled like soap, but there was something else, something chemical and sharp. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Jin was different. Still performing the role of loving boyfriend, but there was an edge underneath that hadn't been there before. He watched me more carefully, asked more questions about my plans for the day, seemed reluctant to leave for his classes. Maybe I should skip today, he said, lingering by the door. Spend some time with my beautiful girlfriend. Don't be silly, I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. You have that important meeting with your thesis advisor. It can wait. Jin, go. I'll be here when you get back. He kissed me goodbye, but his eyes were calculating. The moment his footsteps faded down the hallway, I grabbed my purse and ran. Agent Kim met me at a small coffee shop in Queens, far from anywhere Jin and I had ever been together. She was exactly what I'd expected from her voice, mid-40s, sharp eyes, expensive but understated suit that screamed federal agent. Miss Chen, thank you for coming. How are you holding up? I'm terrified, I admitted. He got a phone call last night. He spoke in Chinese, and I heard him say FBI in video. I think he knows. Agent Kim's expression tightened. That changes things. We need to move faster than planned. She opened a briefcase and pulled out what looked like a small button. This is a transmitter. It'll record everything and broadcast directly to our surveillance team. We need you to get him to admit details about the operation, how many people are involved, where the money goes, what his real timeline is. What if he realizes I know? What if he gets violent? Miss Chen, I won't lie to you. There is risk involved. But we'll have agents positioned outside your building, and if anything goes wrong, we can be inside in under 60 seconds. The tiny transmitter felt impossibly heavy in my palm. What about after? Even if you arrest him, what about the rest of the network? What if they come after me for exposing them? Agent Kim was quiet for a moment. We'll provide protection during the investigation. After that, well, the network will probably move on to easier targets. You've made yourself too visible, too risky. Small comfort. I spent the afternoon in that coffee shop, memorizing what Agent Kim told me about Li Wei's real background, about the scope of the operation, about what specific information the FBI needed to shut down the network. By 4 p.m., I was wired and ready to go home to confront a man who'd been lying to me about everything, including his name. The walk up to my apartment felt like walking to my own execution. Jin was cooking dinner when I came in, same as always. But something was definitely different. His movements were more controlled, his smile a little too practiced. How was your day, sweetheart? Good. Boring meeting with my boss about quarterly reports. We went through the motions of normal conversation, but I could feel him studying me. Testing me. Jin, I said finally, settling on the couch after dinner. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever think about the future? Like, our future specifically? His eyes sharpened slightly. What do you mean? I mean, we've been together for 4 years. We live together, we talk about marriage, but sometimes I feel like I don't really know you. You know me better than anyone. Do I? Sometimes I feel like you're holding back, like there are parts of your life you don't share with me. Jin moved closer on the couch, reaching for my hand. Emma, what's bringing this on? Did something happen today? This was it. The moment I either got him to confess or potentially put myself in serious danger. It's just. Sometimes when you talk to your family, I get the feeling you're talking about me differently than how you talk to me. What do you mean? I mean, yesterday when you were talking to your mom, you seemed, I don't know, less affectionate about our relationship than you are with me directly. Jin went very still. You don't speak Korean, Emma. I know. But tone of voice is universal. You didn't sound like someone talking about the woman he loves. For a long moment, we stared at each other. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much was safe to admit. Sometimes my mother can be difficult about my relationship choices, he said finally. I downplay things to avoid conflict. What kind of things do you downplay? Emma, why are you pushing this? Because I love you, and I want to marry you, but I need to know that you're being honest with me about everything. Something shifted in his expression. The mask slipped, just for a second, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. What do you think I'm lying about? I think you're using me. The words hung in the air between us like a live grenade. Jin was quiet for so long I thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Flatter. The Korean cadence I'd loved for 4 years disappeared entirely. What makes you say that? The phone calls. The secrecy. The way you never want me to meet your family. The way you push for marriage but seem detached from the actual relationship. Jin leaned back against the couch cushions, and I watched his entire demeanor change. The shy, romantic graduate student evaporated, replaced by someone harder, more calculating. How long have you suspected? Months, I lied, hoping he'd reveal more if he thought I'd been building a case against him. And what exactly do you think you know? I think you're not who you say you are. I think this whole relationship has been about getting money and legal status from me. Jin laughed, and the sound sent chills down my spine. You know what, Emma? You're right. My heart stopped, even though I'd been expecting it. My name isn't Jin Park. It's Lee Wei, and I'm from Beijing, not Seoul. I learned Korean specifically for this job. The transmitter felt like it was burning against my skin. Job? Marriage fraud. It's actually quite lucrative once you figure out the right targets. He was speaking normally now, almost conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. Lonely American women with stable incomes and romantic fantasies about foreign men. How many others? You're number 4. Though you've been by far the most profitable. Each word was a knife to the chest, but I forced myself to keep asking questions. What happens now? Well, originally I was going to marry you next month, get my paperwork started, then disappear once everything was processed. But since you figured it out. He shrugged. I'll probably just leave tonight. What about the money I gave you? What about it? You gave it willingly. Good luck proving fraud. And the apartment? All my things? Emma, I don't care about your things. I got what I needed. I felt like I was going to throw up, but I pushed forward. How does it work? The operation? Jin tilted his head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. Why do you want to know? Because I need to understand how stupid I was. That seemed to amuse him. It's actually quite sophisticated. We identify targets through social media, women who post about Korean culture, K-pop, Korean dramas. Then we create detailed profiles designed to appeal to their specific fantasies. We? There are about 20 people in our network. Some handle reconnaissance, others manage documentation, others provide cultural training. 20 people. Agent Kim had estimated 15. The woman you called your mother? My handler. She coordinates the operations and manages the money. How much money? Jin's smile turned predatory. From you? About 70,000 total, between the loans, living expenses, and various other emergencies. $70,000. 4 years of my life. All of it calculated. Do you feel anything at all? I asked, and my voice cracked despite my efforts to stay strong. Any guilt or remorse or anything? Emma, you were a job. A very lucrative job, but still just a job. And the other women? What about them? Do you ever think about how you destroyed their lives? Jin shrugged. They'll get over it. People are resilient. That's when I knew I had enough. More than enough. I stood up from the couch, my legs surprisingly steady. You know what, Lee Wei? You're right about one thing. People are resilient. What's that supposed to mean? It means you made a crucial mistake. What mistake? You assumed I'd stay stupid forever. The confusion on his face was almost worth 4 years of lies. That's when the knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps, followed by FBI. Open up. The look of pure panic that crossed Lee Wei's face was the most genuine expression I'd seen from him in 4 years. You recorded me, he said, and for the first time, he sounded afraid. Every word. Watching him get handcuffed in my living room was the most surreal experience of my life. This person who'd shared my bed, who'd told me he loved me every day, who'd made me believe we were building a future together, reduced to just another criminal being read his rights. As Agent Kim led him toward the door, Li Wei turned back to look at me. "You know none of it was real, right?" he said, and his voice carried that same cruel mockery I'd heard on the phone. "Not a single moment. Every kiss, every I love you, every time I made you think you were special, it was all an act." "I know," I replied, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "But here's what you don't know. I recorded that conversation with your handler yesterday too. And I posted it online. The whole world knows exactly what kind of monster you are." The color drained from his face. "The video has 3 million views now. Your face is everywhere. Your real name, your fake identity, everything about your operation. Even if you somehow get out of prison, you'll never be able to run this scam again." Agent Kim smiled as she guided Li Wei out of my apartment. "Miss Chen, thank you for your cooperation. We'll be in touch about the trial." And then they were gone, leaving me alone in the apartment where I'd been living a lie for 2 years. The months that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and trying to rebuild my sense of reality. I testified at Li Wei's trial, watched him get sentenced to 8 years for fraud, identity theft, and immigration violations. The other victims in his network and I started a support group. We're still working on a class action lawsuit, though our lawyer warns us that recovering any money is unlikely. But here's the part of the story that still doesn't feel real, the part that makes me question whether I can trust my own judgment ever again. 6 weeks after Li Wei's arrest, I got a message on Instagram from someone claiming to be the real Jin Park. "I know this sounds crazy," the message read, "but I think someone has been using my identity to commit crimes in the US. I've been trying to track this down for months after getting strange credit reports and legal notices." The profile looked legitimate, photos going back years, consistent story, friends and family commenting in Korean. But after everything I'd been through, I was suspicious of everything. We started talking carefully, video chatting at random times so I could verify he was really in Seoul. The man I saw on screen looked exactly like Li Wei, but everything else was different. His mannerisms, his way of speaking, the expressions that crossed his face, all of it was softer, more genuine, almost fragile. "I escaped from North Korea 4 years ago," he told me during one of our late-night conversations, his English halting and accented in a way that Li Wei's had never been. "I've been living in Seoul under false documents, trying to build a life in freedom. Someone stole my papers, and I've been trying to figure out how they were being used." The story he told over months of cautious conversation was heartbreaking. Jin had been a low-level soldier who'd escaped during a border patrol, made his way through China to South Korea with the help of a network that assisted defectors. He'd been working menial jobs, learning to navigate life in the South, when his identity documents were somehow compromised and sold to criminal networks. "I kept getting reports about credit applications and legal issues in America," he explained. "I started investigating and found articles about the trial, about what this man did using my name. Every rational part of me screamed that this was another elaborate scam. That I was falling for the same trick twice, just with a different backstory designed to exploit my sympathy. But something about Jin felt different from Li Wei in ways I couldn't quantify. Where Li Wei had been smooth and confident, this Jin seemed uncertain, almost shy. Where Li Wei had used Korean phrases casually and perfectly, this Jin spoke Korean with a slight northern accent and occasionally struggled for words. Where Li Wei had been eager to share culture and stories, this Jin seemed hesitant to talk about his past, like the memories were painful. "I feel responsible for what he did to you," Jin told me one night, his voice barely audible through the video connection. "If I had been more careful with my documents, if I had reported the theft sooner." "It's not your fault," I said, and meant it. "You were just trying to survive." "But he used my name to hurt people. He used my identity to destroy your trust in." He paused, searching for the English words. "In Korean people, maybe. In love." We talked for months before he mentioned wanting to meet in person. By then, I'd had him verified through multiple sources, defector organizations in Seoul, South Korean immigration records, even contacts at the FBI who confirmed that identity theft targeting North Korean refugees was a known problem. Everything checked out. Jin Park was real, and he was exactly who he claimed to be. When he flew to New York 8 months after Li Wei's arrest, I met him at JFK with my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I might pass out. I'd been burned so thoroughly that every rational part of me screamed this was insane, that I was walking straight into another trap. But when I saw him walking through the terminal, looking lost and nervous and carrying a single battered suitcase, I knew immediately that this was different. Li Wei had moved through the world with confidence, like he owned every space he entered. This Jin looked around the airport like he was afraid someone might challenge his right to be there. When our eyes met, his face lit up with such genuine relief and joy that it took my breath away. "Emma?" he said, approaching cautiously, and his voice was softer than Li Wei's had ever been. "Hi, Jin," I replied, and started crying right there in the middle of JFK arrivals. He didn't try to hug me or sweep me into some romantic movie moment. Instead, he stood there awkwardly, holding his suitcase, looking like he wanted to comfort me but wasn't sure if he had the right. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm sorry that man used my name to hurt you. That first week, Jin stayed in a small hotel in Koreatown while we figured out how to navigate this impossible situation. We met for coffee, took careful walks in Central Park, had supervised conversations while I tried to separate this real person from the phantom who'd been haunting my nightmares for months. The differences were stark once I knew what to look for. This Jin was quieter, more thoughtful, prone to long silences when he was processing emotions or searching for English words. His Korean was different too, more formal, with that slight northern accent he was slowly losing after years in Seoul. Where Lee Wei had used casual speech patterns and modern slang, this Jin often sounded like he was translating from textbooks. In North Korea, I learned English from old books, he explained one afternoon as we sat by the reservoir. American books from the 1950s and 60s that somehow made it across the border. My English sometimes sounds old-fashioned? It did. He said things like I would be grateful instead of I'd appreciate it, and perhaps instead of maybe. Lee Wei had spoken like he'd learned English from Netflix and social media. This Jin spoke like he'd learned it from novels. But the biggest difference was in how he talked about emotions. Lee Wei had been performatively romantic, always ready with the right compliment, the perfect gesture, the exact words I wanted to hear. This Jin struggled to express feelings, like he was still learning that it was safe to have them. I don't know how to do this, he admitted during our second week of careful meetings. In North Korea, we didn't talk about feelings. And in Seoul, I've been focused on surviving, on staying hidden. I don't know how to be in a relationship. I don't either, I replied honestly. Not anymore. The honesty was refreshing. Terrifying, but refreshing. We took things so slowly that my friends thought I'd lost my mind. Jin extended his tourist visa, found a job through a Korean community organization that helped defectors, slowly built a life in New York that overlapped with mine but didn't depend on it. I insisted on paying for absolutely nothing. We split every meal, every movie ticket, every small expense down to the penny. I needed to know that whatever was growing between us wasn't based on financial need or convenience. You don't trust me, Jin observed one evening after I'd insisted on separate checks at dinner for the 100th time. I don't trust myself, I corrected. I need to know that I'm not making the same mistake again. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. That's wise. I wouldn't trust me either, if I were you. The fact that he understood my paranoia, that he didn't push for more than I could give, made me start to believe that maybe this was real. Slowly, carefully, I began to learn who Jin actually was beneath the trauma and the caution. He was funny in a quiet, unexpected way. He'd make these dry observations about American culture that caught me off guard and made me laugh until my sides hurt. He was incredibly intelligent but had gaps in his knowledge that sometimes shocked me. He'd never heard of Harry Potter but could explain complex political theories that I'd studied in college. In North Korea, we learned about class struggle and economic theory, he explained when I expressed surprise at his insights into capitalism. But we weren't allowed to read stories about wizards. He was also deeply, profoundly kind in ways that Lee Wei had never been. When my elderly neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez fell and broke her hip, Jin spent his weekends helping her with groceries and cleaning without being asked. When he found a stray cat in the alley behind his apartment, he spent money he couldn't afford on vet bills and founded a home through a rescue organization. In North Korea, we were taught that kindness was weakness, he told me when I asked about his compulsive helpfulness. But I think maybe cruelty is the real weakness. Maybe kindness takes more courage. It took almost a year before I felt safe enough to say I was falling in love with him. Another 6 months before I could say it out loud. We were walking through Prospect Park on a Sunday afternoon in spring, watching families have picnics and children play on the playground, when Jin suddenly stopped walking. Emma, he said, and his voice was very serious. I need to tell you something. My heart clenched. After everything I'd been through, serious conversations still triggered panic. Okay, I managed. I love you, he said simply. I know that's complicated because of what that other man did using my name. I know you have every reason not to believe me. But I needed you to know. I stood there in the middle of the park, looking at this man who'd been patiently, quietly, carefully earning my trust for over a year, and felt something shift inside my chest. I love you too, I whispered. Are you sure? He asked, and his uncertainty was so genuine it made my heart ache. I don't want you to feel pressured, or to think you have to say it because I did. I'm sure, I said, and meant it. He smiled then, the first truly unguarded smile I'd ever seen from him, and I knew we were going to be okay. We got engaged the following spring, 2 years after meeting at JFK, but this time, I insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would protect both of us, my assets from potential fraud, his immigration status from being tied to financial dependency. Are you sure about this? My lawyer asked when I explained the situation. This prenup is pretty ironclad. He won't get anything if you divorce. That's the point, I replied. If he marries me, it has to be because he wants to be married to me. Not for money, not for status, not for anything but love. When I presented the prenup to Jin, he read it carefully, then looked up at me with those eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. You still don't completely trust me, he said. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. I trust you, I replied. But I don't trust my own judgment. I need to know that this decision isn't about anything except us choosing each other. Jin was quiet for a long time, reading through the legal language that essentially said he'd walk away from our marriage with nothing more than he'd brought to it. Finally, he signed without hesitation. I've been poor before, he told me, handing back the papers. I can be poor again. But I can't pretend to love someone. It would destroy me. That's when I knew, deep in my bones, that this was real. We're getting married next month. Small ceremony, just close friends and the small family Jin has slowly been reconnecting with, a distant cousin who made it to South Korea years before him, a few fellow defectors who've become his chosen family, and Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, who's adopted both of us as surrogate grandchildren. Planning the wedding has been complicated in ways I never expected. Jin still has nightmares sometimes about being found by North Korean agents. He jumps when cars backfire or when someone approaches him unexpectedly on the street. The trauma of escape, of living in hiding, of having his identity stolen and used to hurt people, all of it has left scars that don't just disappear because we love each other. But we're learning to navigate it together. Jin goes to therapy twice a week with a counselor who specializes in refugee trauma. I'm still working with my own therapist on trust issues and recognizing manipulation tactics. We're both learning that healing isn't linear, that some days are harder than others, that love doesn't magically erase damage but it can provide a safe space to do the work of recovery. 3 weeks ago, Jin got his work visa approved through the organization that's been helping him. He cried when he got the news, actual tears of relief and joy and disbelief that he was going to be okay, that he was safe, that he could build a real life here. I never thought I'd be free, he told me that night as we celebrated with takeout Chinese food on my couch. Not really free. But I think maybe I am now. You are, I said, and kissed his forehead. We both are. The TikTok video that started this whole nightmare is still online. Sometimes I read the comments and remember that heartbroken, angry girl who just wanted the world to know she'd been lied to. I don't recognize her anymore, but I'm grateful to her for being brave enough to fight back, because her courage led me to this. Last night, Jin was talking to his cousin in Seoul, discussing final wedding preparations. I was reading in bed, half listening to their rapid Korean conversation, when I heard him say something that made me look up. She saved my life, he was telling his cousin in Korean, not realizing I could understand every word. Not from North Korea, I saved myself from that. But from thinking I'd never be safe enough to love someone. From believing that trust was impossible. He caught me watching him and switched to English, like he always did when he realized I was listening. Sorry, were we too loud? No, I said, closing my book and smiling. Just loud enough. Jin looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened as he realized what I'd said. You speak Korean, he said, and it wasn't a question. I've been fluent for years, I admitted. I learned it for him. For Li Wei. I wanted to surprise him, but then everything happened and I never told you because I didn't want you to think I was still obsessed with some fantasy about Korean men. Jin was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. How much do you understand when I talk to my family? Everything. And you never said anything? I was afraid you'd think it was weird. Or that you'd feel like I was spying on you. Jin set down his phone and moved closer to me on the bed. Emma, he said, switching to Korean, do you know what I told my cousin the first time I called him after meeting you? I shook my head. I told him I thought I might be falling in love with the kindest person I'd ever met. Someone who'd been hurt badly but was still brave enough to trust again. His Korean was soft, musical, nothing like Li Wei's calculated performance. I told him I was terrified because I'd never felt safe enough to love someone before. And what did he say? He said maybe that was the point. Maybe love is supposed to be terrifying because it means you finally have something worth protecting. I started crying then, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that this was real, that Jin was exactly who he claimed to be, that love could be honest and complicated and still beautiful. I love you, I said in Korean, the words feeling right in my mouth for the first time in years. I love you too, he replied, and kissed me softly. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about finding your perfect match or living out some romantic fantasy. Sometimes they're about two people who've been broken by the world finding each other and deciding that maybe, together, they can heal. Maybe they can build something real and honest and theirs. I don't know if Jin and I will make it forever. Love doesn't come with guarantees, especially when you're both carrying trauma and learning how to trust again. But I know that whatever we build together will be based on truth, on choice, on the radical decision to keep showing up for each other even when it's hard. The prenup we signed protects us both, but more than that, it represents a promise that we're choosing each other not because we need to, but because we want to. Not because of money or status or fantasies about what love should look like, but because of who we actually are underneath all the fear and damage. And after everything I've been through, that feels like the most romantic thing in the world. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Small ceremony at City Hall, followed by dinner at Jin's favorite Korean restaurant in Queens, a tiny place run by an elderly couple who knew his story and treated him like family from the moment he walked through their door. Mrs. Rodriguez is making the cake. Jin's cousin is flying in from Seoul to be his best man. My sister is my maid of honor, and she's promised not to mention how worried she was about me dating another Korean man so soon after the Leeway disaster. Are you sure about this? She asked me last week as we went dress shopping. I mean, I like Jin, but the whole situation is pretty complicated. I'm sure, I told her, trying on a simple white dress that made me feel beautiful instead of like I was playing a role. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. And it is real. The morning arguments about who's going to take out the trash. The way Jin falls asleep watching Netflix and I have to turn off the TV. The fact that he's terrible at remembering to replace the toilet paper roll but always apologizes when I point it out. The way he makes coffee exactly the way I like it without being asked, and how he gets excited about small things like finding a good deal at the grocery store or getting a text from his cousin. These aren't the grand romantic gestures of K-drama fantasies. They're better. They're real life, messy and imperfect and honest. Last weekend, we were assembling IKEA furniture for our new apartment. Yes, we're finally officially moving in together after 2 years of careful separate living arrangements, when Jin suddenly started laughing. What's so funny? I asked, looking up from the incomprehensible instruction manual. I was just thinking, he said, holding up 2 identical screws that were somehow supposed to be different according to the diagram. In North Korea, I used to dream about freedom. But I always imagined it would be dramatic, making speeches or traveling the world or doing important things. And instead you're building IKEA furniture with your girlfriend? And instead I'm building IKEA furniture with my fiancé, and arguing about whether this is screw A or screw B, and it's perfect. He looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much darkness but were learning to see light again. This is what freedom actually looks like. The ordinary moments. The choice to be here, doing something boring, with someone I love. I kissed him then, there in our half-assembled living room, surrounded by cardboard and tiny screws and the detritus of building a life together. I love our boring life, I told him. I love it too, he replied, and went back to studying the instruction manual like it contained the secrets of the universe. That night, as we lay in bed in our new bedroom that still smelled like fresh paint and possibility, I thought about how far we'd both come. Jin from a country where love was dangerous, where trust could get you killed, where survival meant never letting anyone get too close. Me from a place of such profound betrayal that I'd been afraid I'd never be able to trust my own heart again. But here we were, choosing each other every day, building something that was ours. The story that started with the most devastating lie I'd ever been told had somehow become the most honest love I'd ever experienced. And tomorrow, we'll wake up and make coffee and argue about whose turn it is to do laundry and plan our small, perfect wedding, and it will be ordinary and beautiful and real. Sometimes that's the best kind of love story there is.
Story 4.
No need to wait, my fiancé texted as I stood at the altar. Your sister already proposed, I said yes. A minute later, my dad sent, by the way, we all knew. Don't make a scene. So I didn't. I just told the 150 guests that the wedding was off and nodded to the cameraman to send me all the footage he had caught. At midnight, I sent them both a link with the message you're about to go viral all over TikTok. 30 minutes later, desperate knocks on my door. I used to think betrayal would feel like a dramatic movie moment, like time freezing or the world going silent. It doesn't. It feels like your phone buzzing in your hand while you're wondering if your veil is crooked. That's how it happened for me. Standing in that little antechamber of the church, 30 seconds from walking down the aisle, when the text from Ryan lit up my screen. 7 words that collapse my future like a house of cards, no need to wait. Your sister already proposed. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I just stood there, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Like when you read a sentence in a foreign language and your mind just skips over it. Then the second part, I said yes. The makeup artist was asking something about my lipstick. The wedding coordinator was checking her watch. My mother had just left to take her seat. I remember these details with strange clarity, how the coordinator's watch had a tiny scratch on its face, how the makeup artist had a spot of foundation on her sleeve. Then my phone buzzed again. My dad this time, by the way, we all knew. Don't make a scene. That's when I felt it, not as a movie moment, but as a physical thing. Like I'd swallowed something cold and heavy that was now sitting in my stomach. My whole body went numb from the inside out. All knew? All who? My parents? My friends? How long had this been happening? How many smiles had been fake? How many conversations had been lies? The wedding coordinator, Marissa, I think her name was, touched my arm. 2 minutes, Ellie. Ready? I looked up at her, this stranger who was about to usher me into a ceremony that was apparently a complete joke to everyone involved. Including my father. Including my sister Kate. No, I said. My voice sounded strange, too calm, too controlled. The wedding is off. Marissa's professional smile froze. I'm sorry, what did you say? I showed her the texts. Her eyes widened. Oh my gosh, she whispered. I remember thinking how bizarre it was that this woman I barely knew was now the only person in the building who wasn't laughing behind my back. What do you want to do? She asked. What did I want to do? Run. Hide. Scream. Disappear. But something cold and clear was crystallizing inside me. I'll tell them myself, I said. The worst walk of my life wasn't down the aisle, it was across the vestibule to the main doors of the sanctuary. Each step in my ridiculous white heels echoed on the marble floor. My dress, the one I'd spent months choosing, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Every head turned. 150 pairs of eyes locked on me standing there in the doorway, not where I was supposed to be. Ryan was at the altar, his best man beside him. He had the nerve to look confused. My sister Kate was in the front row where she was supposed to be as my maid of honor. She was wearing the sage green dress I'd chosen for her, the one she'd complained made her look sallow. She was clutching her bouquet so hard her knuckles were white. I walked to the center of the aisle. The dress rustled against the petal-scattered carpet. The sound seemed deafening in the silence. I'm sorry to announce, I said, and my voice carried clearly through the space, that there will be no wedding today. Murmurs. Gasps. Ryan stepping forward, his face a mask of concern. Such a good actor. Ellie, what's wrong? He called. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd loved for 3 years. The man I'd planned to spend my life with. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His gray suit perfectly tailored. His face perfectly arranged in an expression of worry. I just received some interesting texts, I said, still in that strange, calm voice. It seems my fiancé and my sister have their own announcement to make. More murmurs. Kate's face drained of color. Ryan's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of panic in his eyes. My father stood up. Eleanor, this is not the place. Not the place for what, Dad? I turned to him. Not the place for the truth? When would be a good time? After the honeymoon? At our first anniversary? When? The weight in my stomach was spreading, turning into something hot and powerful. Not anger exactly. Something cleaner. Something like justice. I turned back to the confused crowd. The wedding is cancelled because the groom is in a relationship with the bride's sister. Apparently, everyone knew. I paused. Except me. The sanctuary erupted. People standing, voices rising. Ryan striding down the aisle towards me, his face dark with anger now, not pretend concern. Kate crying, my mother holding her. As if she were the victim? I turned away from all of them and caught the eye of the videographer, Marco, a college friend I'd hired instead of Ryan's cousin like he'd wanted. Marco, who had been filming everything from the moment the doors opened. I nodded to him, and he nodded back. Message received. Then I walked out, leaving chaos behind me. In the parking lot, I kicked off my heels, hiked up my dress, and drove away in my decorated getaway car, tin cans and all. The first 24 hours after a catastrophe have a dreamlike quality. I drove to a hotel, not the one where we'd booked the honeymoon suite, obviously, and checked in wearing my wedding dress because I had nothing else with me. The desk clerk didn't even blink. Bad day? She asked. I actually laughed. You could say that. Room service is on the house, she said, handing me the key card. Whatever you need. I ordered a bottle of champagne and drank it in the bathtub, still wearing my veil. Then I fell asleep for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, it was dark outside. My phone had 137 missed calls and over 200 texts. I ignored them all and ordered a pizza. While I waited, I texted Marco, "Do you have all the footage?" He replied immediately, every second. Before, during, and after. Including Ryan and Kate arguing in the parking lot afterward. What do you want me to do with it? What did I want? I wasn't sure yet. But I knew I wanted evidence. Proof. Something to hold on to when people inevitably started spinning the story. Send me everything, I wrote. I'll pay you extra. Already uploading to a private drive, he responded. And don't worry about payment. This one's on the house. The pizza arrived. I ate it sitting cross-legged on the hotel bed, scrolling through the texts and calls without opening any of them. From Ryan, 23 missed calls, 47 texts. The most recent, "You're being childish. We need to talk about this like adults." From Kate, 18 missed calls, 36 texts. Her latest, "Please Ellie, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Let me explain." From Mom, 15 calls, 22 texts. "Your sister is devastated. Call me." From Dad, 7 calls, 5 texts. This family situation needs to be handled privately. Then dozens more from friends, relatives, guests. All wanting details, explanations. All expecting me to manage their shock and discomfort. Not a single "I'm sorry this happened to you." I turned off my phone and took another shower. I scrubbed off the professional makeup, washed out the elaborate updo, watched the remnants of my wedding day swirl down the drain. That's when I started to cry, really cry, deep, ugly sobs that left me gasping. I cried for the 3 years I'd spent with Ryan. For the future I'd planned. For the trust I'd placed in my family. For the humiliation of standing in front of everyone I knew and announcing my own betrayal. When I was empty of tears, I wrapped myself in a hotel bathrobe and turned my phone back on. The notification count had doubled. But there was a new email from Marco with a link to a folder. The footage. Everything. I clicked on the first video and watched myself enter the sanctuary, saw the exact moment when everyone realized something was wrong. Watched Ryan's face change from confusion to anger. Saw Kate's panic. Witnessed my father's attempt to control the situation. Then I watched the videos Marco had taken earlier, the pre-ceremony preparations. Ryan joking with his groomsmen. Kate nervously checking her phone. My father pulling Ryan aside for a private conversation, both their faces serious. And finally, the parking lot footage after I'd left. Ryan and Kate arguing furiously next to his car. Him grabbing her arm. Her pulling away. My father intervening, gesturing angrily at both of them. I watched it all twice. Then I ordered another bottle of champagne and started to make a plan. By midnight, I created a TikTok account with a username at Left at the Altar. I'd edited together 3 short videos from Marco's footage. The first showed Ryan and my father in their private conversation, with Ryan saying, "She doesn't suspect anything." The second showed my entrance and announcement, capturing the shock on the guests' faces. The third showed the parking lot argument, with Kate yelling, "You said we'd wait until after the honeymoon." And Ryan responding, "Well, your timing is just as bad as your sister's." I didn't add any commentary. No sad music. No filters. Just raw footage with a simple caption, "When your fiancé and sister have been having an affair and your family knew all along." Part 1 of 3. I posted all 3 videos in sequence, then copied the link to the first one. I opened a new text message to Ryan and Kate, added both their numbers and wrote, "You're about to go viral all over TikTok." Then I pasted the link and hit send. For good measure, I sent the same message to my parents. Then I turned off my phone, finished the champagne, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The knocking woke me just after 12:30 a.m. Not gentle knocking, desperate pounding that made the door rattle in its frame. "Ellie. Open the door. I know you're in there." Ryan's voice. Slurred with alcohol or panic or both. I lay perfectly still, my heart hammering. "Please, Ellie. The videos, you have to take them down. People are already sharing them." More pounding? My boss follows TikTok. My mother is calling me. "Ellie, please." I slid out of bed and crept to the door, pressed my eye to the peephole. Ryan was there, his perfect hair disheveled, his tie loose around his neck. And behind him, Kate. Still in her sage green dress, mascara streaked down her face. "Let us explain," she called through the door. "Please, Ellie. It's not what it looks like." I almost laughed. Not what it looks like? What else could it possibly be? "Go away," I said, loud enough for them to hear. "Or I'll call hotel security." "You're ruining our lives," Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you understand that? The things people are saying online." I didn't say anything, I replied calmly. "I just showed them what happened. Your own words. Your own actions. Those videos are private property," my sister hissed. "You can't just..." "Actually, I hired Marco. I paid for the footage. It's mine." There was a pause, then the sound of whispered argument. "Dad is on his way," Kate said finally. "He's going to fix this." Fix this. Like it was a fender bender or a bad grade on a test. Something that could be smoothed over with money or influence. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "It's already broken." More pounding, more pleading. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. 5 minutes later, I heard the elevator ding, followed by my father's voice in the hallway. "Enough," he said sharply. "You're making a scene. Always concerned about appearances. Always worried about what people would think." There was a quiet knock on the door. "Eleanor," my father said. "It's Dad. Open the door so we can discuss this like a family." I stood up and moved to the door again. "There's nothing to discuss. Those videos are damaging to this family's reputation," he said, his voice low and controlled. "They need to be removed immediately." "They're truthful," I replied. "And they're staying up. Think about your sister's future," he urged. Think about Ryan's career. I am thinking, I said. I'm thinking about how none of you thought about me when you were lying to my face for months. Maybe years. Silence. Then, this vindictiveness isn't like you, Eleanor. That's when something inside me snapped. You don't know me, I said, my voice rising. None of you do. If you did, you'd have known I would never, ever stand for being treated this way. Not by the man I loved. Not by my sister. And especially not by my own parents. People make mistakes, my father said, his tone hardening. Mature adults forgive. Forgiveness is earned, I shot back. And none of you have even apologized. You're just worried about your reputations. More arguing in the hallway. Then Kate's voice, tear-filled but clear. I'm sorry, Ellie. I'm so sorry. Please, just open the door. For a moment, I hesitated. This was my little sister. The girl I'd taught to ride a bike. The teenager whose tears I'd wiped when her first boyfriend broke up with her. Then I remembered her clutching that bouquet, knowing all along what was happening. Wearing the dress I'd chosen while secretly planning to take my place. Go home, I said. All of you. I'll talk when I'm ready. Not before. After more arguments and threats, they finally left. I sat in the dark hotel room, listening to the silence, feeling strangely light. Empty, but not in a bad way. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally set it down. My phone was blowing up with notifications. The videos were spreading, comments pouring in. Strangers on the internet offering support, sharing their own stories of betrayal, expressing outrage on my behalf. It wasn't justice, exactly. But it was something. By morning, the videos had millions of views. Ryan had deleted his social media accounts. Kate had made hers private. My parents weren't online much anyway, but I imagined their phones were ringing constantly. I checked out of the hotel wearing yesterday's wedding dress, ignoring the stares from other guests. I had nowhere to go. The apartment I'd shared with Ryan was full of our things, our shared life, our plans. So I drove to the one person who might understand. My grandmother, my father's mother, who lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. The woman who had raised my father alone after my grandfather left, who had never remarried, who had built a life on her own terms. She opened the door before I could knock, took one look at me in my rumpled wedding dress, and said, "Well, it's about time you showed up." "You've seen the videos," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Mrs. Abernathy next door showed me on her phone. That woman is always on TikTok. She held the door open wider. "Come in. I've made coffee." I followed her into the kitchen, the dress rustling against the narrow hallway walls. She poured me a cup of coffee, added cream without asking because she knew how I took it, and sat across from me at her small kitchen table. "Your father called," she said. Gave me an earful about family loyalty and discretion. I stared into my coffee. And I told him he should be ashamed of himself. She reached across the table and patted my hand. "What they did to you was wrong, Ellie. All of them." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It's the truth." She sipped her coffee. "Though I will say, those videos are quite something. Very dramatic." Despite everything, I smiled. I didn't plan it this way. Of course not. But sometimes life hands you lemons, and sometimes it hands you footage of your cheating fiancé and sister that goes viral on the internet. She shrugged. "You work with what you've got." I actually laughed then, a rusty sound that surprised me. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said. "The guest room is yours. And I have some clothes that might fit you, unless you plan to wear that dress forever." "I'm never wearing white again," I said, only half joking. She nodded sagely. "I went through a similar phase after your grandfather left. Wore nothing but black for a year. Very gothic. But eventually, you remember that colors exist." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then she said, "What's your plan now, Ellie?" I'd been asking myself the same question all night. "I don't know," I admitted. "Everything I had planned is gone." "Good," she said firmly. I looked up, surprised. "Plans are overrated," she continued. "Especially the ones that involve men who don't deserve you. Or families who don't support you." She leaned forward. "This is your chance to make new plans. Better ones." "I'm 32, Grandma. I can't just start over." She actually snorted. "I was 41 when your grandfather walked out. Had to get my first job, find a new place to live, learn to change my own oil. If I could do it then, you can certainly do it now." She was right, of course. My grandmother had reinvented herself in her 40s and built a life she loved. If she could do it, so could I. "First things first," I said. "I need to get my stuff from the apartment." She nodded. "I'll come with you. No arguments, She added when I started to protest. You think your father is stubborn? He learned it from me. Ryan was waiting at the apartment. Sitting on the steps outside the building, head in his hands. He looked up when we pulled in, his face lighting with hope when he saw my car. The hope died when he saw my grandmother in the passenger seat. Ellie, he said, standing as we approached. Thank God. We need to talk. My grandmother stepped between us. No, you don't, she said firmly. Eleanor is here to collect her belongings. That's all. He looked down at her, this small, fierce woman in her 70s, with something between amusement and irritation. With all due respect, Mrs. Chen, this is between me and Ellie. With no respect whatsoever, she retorted, nothing is between you and my granddaughter anymore. You made sure of that when you took up with her sister. His face darkened. This situation is more complicated than those videos show. I don't see how sleeping with your fiancé's sister can be complicated, she said calmly. It seems quite straightforward to me. A simple case of poor character. I touched her arm. It's okay, Grandma. I can handle this. She studied my face, then nodded. I'll be right here, she said, moving to lean against my car, arms crossed. I turned to Ryan. In the harsh daylight, he looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, yesterday's clothes rumpled. Good. The videos, he said without preamble. They're destroying me. My parents are getting calls. My boss pulled me into a meeting this morning. People are making assumptions. People are seeing the truth, I corrected. Not the whole truth, he insisted. Kate and I, it just happened, Ellie. We didn't plan it. And we were going to tell you, after the wedding. I stared at him, incredulous. After the wedding? You were going to marry me, knowing you were in love with my sister? He had the grace to look ashamed. It wasn't like that. I do love you, Ellie. I just also love my sister, I finished for him. And somehow thought the solution was to marry me anyway. He ran a hand through his hair. Your father thought, my father, I interrupted, doesn't get to decide who you marry. Neither does Kate. That was supposed to be my choice. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time, he sounded sincere. I handled it badly. We all did. Yes, you did. I moved past him toward the building entrance. Now, I'm going to pack my things. You can either stay out here, or you can help me carry boxes. Those are your only options. He followed me upstairs silently. The apartment felt alien, all our shared things suddenly unfamiliar, tainted. The framed photos of us together. The furniture we'd chosen. The kitchen where we'd cooked countless meals. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled out my suitcases. Started with the essentials, clothes, toiletries, jewelry, important documents. Ryan hovered in the doorway. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. Box up my books, I said, not looking at him. They're mostly on the left side of the bookshelf. He disappeared into the living room. I continued packing methodically, trying not to think about the life I was dismantling. An hour later, my car was loaded with suitcases and boxes. Not everything I owned, but enough to start over. I'd come back for the rest later, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some things weren't worth carrying forward. Ryan stood beside me as I closed the trunk. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now I leave, I said simply. I meant with us. With the videos. With everything. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd planned to marry. The man I trusted with my heart, my future, my family. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not love. Just emptiness where those feelings used to be. There is no us anymore, I said. As for the videos, they stay up. His face hardened. You know that makes you look vindictive. People are already saying, I don't care what people are saying, I cut him off. I care about the truth. And the truth is that you and Kate and my parents conspired to humiliate me. You are going to marry me while loving my sister. That's the reality, Ryan. People make mistakes, he said, echoing my father's words from the night before. Yes, they do, I agreed. And sometimes those mistakes have consequences. These are yours. I got into the car where my grandmother was waiting. As I started the engine, Ryan leaned down to the window. Kate is devastated, he said. She's your sister, Ellie. Whatever happened between us, that hasn't changed. I looked straight ahead. Tell Kate that when she's ready to talk to me directly, not through you, not with my parents present, I'll listen. Until then, we have nothing to say to each other. I drove away without looking back, my grandmother silent beside me. It wasn't until we were halfway to her house that she spoke. You handled that well, she said. Did I? I wasn't sure. Part of me felt strong, powerful. Another part felt petty and mean. You stood your ground without being cruel, she said. That's not easy to do when you've been hurt. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I don't know what happens next, Grandma. My whole life was planned around Ryan, around our future together. That's the problem right there, she said gently. Your life should never be planned around someone else. It should be planned around you, what you want, what you need, who you are. I'm not sure I know who I am without him, I admitted. She chuckled. Well, then. Isn't that an interesting thing to find out? The next few days passed in a blur. I stayed in my grandmother's guest room, sleeping more than I had in years. When I was awake, I fielded calls from friends and distant relatives, all wanting to know if the videos were real, if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. My phone continued to blow up with notifications from TikTok. The videos had spawned dozens of reaction videos, commentary, and stitches. Some people criticized me for airing dirty laundry publicly. Most supported me. I didn't engage with any of it. I just let it happen, like watching a storm from inside a warm, dry house. On the fourth day, as I was helping my grandmother weed her garden, a car pulled up. Kate stepped out, alone. She was wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. She looked young and vulnerable, and nothing like the confident maid of honor who had stood beside me at countless dress fittings. My grandmother straightened, garden trowel in hand like a weapon. Should I stay? She asked quietly. I shook my head. It's okay. We need to talk alone. She nodded, gave Kate a long, measuring look, then went inside. Kate approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. Hi, she said, her voice small. Hi, I replied, not making it easier for her. She twisted her hands together. I don't know where to start. The beginning would be good, I said. How long? She understood the question. 8 months, she admitted. Since Christmas. Christmas. When Ryan had come with me to my parents' house for the holiday. When Kate had flown in from Chicago where she lived. When we'd all stayed under one roof for 5 days. And Dad? Mom? When did they find out? She looked down. Dad figured it out at Easter. He saw Ryan and me talking outside. He confronted us. Made us tell Mom. And no one thought to tell me, I said, the familiar cold weight settling in my stomach again. Dad thought it would be better to wait until after the wedding, she said, her voice barely audible. He said it would be too embarrassing to cancel everything, that we should just get through it and then figure things out. Figure things out, I repeated. You mean, wait until Ryan and I were married, then announce that he was actually in love with you? That was the plan? She nodded miserably. It sounds awful when you say it like that. It sounds awful because it is awful, Kate. I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. What did you think would happen? That I'd just step aside? Wish you both well? Get an annulment and pretend none of it mattered? I don't know, she whispered. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I loved him. And what about me? I asked. Did you think about me at all? Your sister? She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. All the time. That's why I was going to tell you that day. I couldn't go through with it anymore. But then Dad found out I was planning to talk to you, and he took my phone. So you're blaming Dad now? No. She shook her head vehemently. No, I'm not blaming anyone but myself. What I did was wrong. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I studied her face, searching for any sign of manipulation or insincerity. All I saw was raw pain and genuine remorse. You proposed to him, I said. At my wedding. She winced. It wasn't a proposal. Not really. I texted him that morning. I was panicking. I couldn't stand the thought of watching you marry him knowing how I felt, knowing what we'd done. I said we should tell you the truth, that we should run away together instead. And he agreed, I said flatly. He said yes to telling you the truth. Not to running away. She wiped at her tears. That's why he texted you. He thought it would be better coming from him than from me or Dad. I laughed bitterly. Better? To get a text like that while I'm standing in my wedding dress? How could that possibly be better? It wasn't, she agreed quickly. It was horrible. All of it was horrible. We stood in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun warm on our backs, the scent of freshly turned earth around us. Are you still with him? I asked finally. She shook her head. No. After the videos. After seeing what we'd done to you. I couldn't. We both agreed it was over. I wasn't sure whether to believe her. It seemed convenient, too convenient, that their grand passion had dissolved the moment it became public. The videos, she said hesitantly. They're everywhere, Ellie. People I work with have seen them. Old friends from high school. Everyone. That was the point, I said. I know. She took a deep breath. I'm not asking you to take them down. I deserve whatever happens. But Mom and Dad chose their side, I interrupted. They chose to lie to me, to protect you and Ryan instead of me. They don't get to complain about the consequences. They love you, she said softly. They made a terrible mistake, but they love you. Love doesn't lie, I said simply. Love doesn't conspire. Love doesn't humiliate. She nodded, fresh tears spilling. You're right. And I'm so sorry, Ellie. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry. Looking at her, this person who shared my blood, my childhood, my history, I felt a crack in the wall of anger I'd built. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the possibility of it, someday. I need time, I said finally. A lot of time. I understand, she said quickly. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when, if, you're ready to talk again. She turned to go, then stopped. For what it's worth, I think what you did was brave. Standing up for yourself like that. I've never been that brave. Then she was gone, driving away in her sensible sedan, leaving me standing in my grandmother's garden with dirt under my fingernails and an emptiness in my chest that felt, just slightly, less crushing than before. 2 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I moved into a small apartment downtown. My grandmother had offered to let me stay with her indefinitely, but we both knew I needed my own space to rebuild. The apartment was nothing like the one I'd shared with Ryan. It was older, with character, exposed brick walls, tall windows, creaky wooden floors. I furnished it sparsely, buying only what I needed and nothing that reminded me of my old life. I'd taken a leave of absence from my job at the architectural firm where I'd worked for the past 6 years. My boss had been understanding, he'd seen the videos, of course. Everyone had. Being TikTok famous was strange. Strangers recognized me in coffee shops, at the grocery store. Some wanted selfies. Others just wanted to tell me their own stories of betrayal and survival. The videos had spawned a hashtag left at the altar. People used it to share their own experiences of wedding disasters, relationship betrayals, family secrets exposed. It had become something bigger than just my story. I had mixed feelings about it all. On one hand, the public nature of my humiliation made it impossible to hide, to pretend it hadn't happened. On the other hand, the support from strangers was overwhelming and genuine. 3 weeks after moving into the new apartment, I received a letter from my parents. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter, handwritten by my mother, signed by both of them. It was an apology, sincere, heartfelt, without excuses or qualifications. They acknowledged the pain they'd caused, the trust they'd broken. They asked for forgiveness but made it clear they didn't expect it anytime soon. At the end, my father had added a postscript in his precise handwriting: I failed you as a father. My concern for appearances overcame my duty to protect you from harm. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. I read the letter twice, then set it aside. Not ready to respond, not yet. But ready to consider the possibility of responding someday. A month after the non-wedding, I was having coffee at my favorite cafe when someone sat down across from me. I looked up to find Marco, the videographer, smiling tentatively. Hey, he said. I hope this isn't weird. I was passing by and saw you through the window. Not weird, I assured him. It's good to see you. And it was. Marco had been the one person in this whole mess who had simply done the right thing without question or hesitation. How are you? He asked. I considered the question. A month ago, I would have had a simple answer: terrible, heartbroken, betrayed. Now, I'm recalibrating, I said finally. Finding my feet again. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. The videos are still going strong, you know. Over 20 million views now. I haven't checked in a while, I admitted. It started to feel like watching someone else's life. I get that. He sipped his coffee. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Putting it all out there. Do you? I wasn't sure myself anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. He shook his head. They were planning to go through with the wedding, Ellie. They were going to let you marry a man who was in love with your sister. You deserved to fight back. But that way, it sounded reasonable. Just. Anyway, he continued, I wanted to tell you something. I've been getting calls from production companies. 3 so far. They want to talk about rights to your story. I nearly choked on my coffee. My story? For what? A documentary, maybe. Or one of those based on true events TV movies. He grinned. Left at the altar, the Eleanor Chen story. You're joking. I'm not. They're offering real money, Ellie. And they want to talk to you directly. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. My humiliation is entertainment. My pain is profit. It was absurd. And yet, would I have control? I heard myself asking. Over how the story is told? That's what they want to discuss. He pulled out his phone. I can give you their contact information. Think about it. I did think about it. For days afterward, I turned the idea over in my mind. Not for the money, though that would certainly help with my new start. But for the narrative, the ability to tell my story on my own terms, not just in snippets of viral video. A week later, I met with a producer from a streaming service. A woman about my age, sharp-eyed and straightforward. We don't want to sensationalize, she told me. We want the human story. The betrayal, yes, but also the recovery. The rebuilding. I'm still in the middle of that part, I said. She smiled. That's what makes it compelling. It's not just about what happened to you. It's about what you do next. What I did next. That was the question, wasn't it? 6 months after my non-wedding, I signed a contract for a documentary series. Not just about the wedding disaster, but about the aftermath, about trust, betrayal, and rebuilding a life after public humiliation. The filming process was therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. Revisiting the church where it happened. Walking through my old apartment, now emptied of Ryan's things. Sitting down with my grandmother to talk about resilience in second acts. I drew the line at including Ryan or Kate or my parents in the project. This was my story to tell, not theirs. They'd had their chance to shape the narrative and had chosen deception. Now it was my turn for truth. The director wanted to end the series with some kind of reconciliation scene, me forgiving my family, perhaps, or at least sitting down with them. I refused. That's not where this story ends, I told her. At least, not yet. Then where does it end? She asked. Good question. Where did my story end? Or rather, where did this chapter of it end? I thought about the previous 6 months. About the apartment I'd made my own. About the freelance architectural work I'd started doing, on my own terms. About the new friends I'd made who knew me only as I was now, not as half of a couple or as someone's daughter or sister. It ends with me, I said. Just me. Figuring out who I am when everything I thought I knew has changed. She seemed to understand. The final episode ended with me sitting on the rooftop garden of my new building, watching the sunset over the city. Alone, but not lonely. Different, but not broken. After the documentary aired, my TikTok following quadrupled. People reached out from all over the world, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Some had experienced almost identical situations, fiancés running off with siblings or best friends, families choosing sides, public humiliations. I started responding to some of them, offering what little wisdom I'd gained. Don't rush forgiveness. Allow yourself to feel everything. Rebuild on your own terms. And most importantly, you are not defined by what was done to you, but by how you choose to move forward. A year after the wedding that wasn't, I received a text from Kate. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm moving to Seattle next month for a new job. I wanted you to know so you don't hear it from someone else. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for telling me. Good luck with the new job. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was communication, direct, honest communication. A small step. My parents were more complicated. My mother called every Sunday, leaving voicemails I sometimes listened to but rarely responded to. My father sent emails with links to articles he thought might interest me, careful not to push for more than I was ready to give. Ryan I heard about only through mutual friends. He'd moved to Chicago, ironic, since Kate had left there. He was dating someone new. He seemed happy. I found I didn't care one way or the other. 18 months after I stood in that church and announced my own betrayal to 150 confused guests, I was setting up my booth at a design conference when someone approached. Excuse me, a man said. Are you Eleanor Chen? The architect? I looked up, expecting to see the now familiar recognition of someone who knew me from TikTok or the documentary. Instead, I saw genuine professional interest. I am, I said, extending my hand. And you are? Daniel Reyes. I'm with Habitat International. He shook my hand firmly. I saw your presentation yesterday on sustainable community design. It was impressive. Thank you, I said, genuinely pleased. This was why I'd come to the conference, to be recognized for my work, not my viral moment of humiliation. Our organization is launching a new project in the Philippines, he continued. Building resilient housing in areas affected by climate change. We're looking for architects with your perspective. We talked for nearly an hour, about design philosophy, practical challenges, community involvement. Not once did he mention weddings or viral videos or family betrayal. Just professional respect and shared passion for meaningful work. As he was leaving, he handed me his card. "Think about it," he said. "It would mean relocating for at least a year, but I think your contribution could be significant." I turned the card over in my hand, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in a long time. A new challenge? A new place? A purpose bigger than my own pain. That evening, I called my grandmother. "The Philippines," she repeated after I explained. "That's quite a change." "It is," I agreed. "Too much?" "Not at all," she said firmly. "Your grandfather was from Manila, you know. Before he moved here and met me." I did know, vaguely, though we rarely spoke of him. "Would it bother you? Me going so far away?" "Ellie," she said gently, "you've spent the past year and a half rebuilding your life. You've done it beautifully. But you've been doing it in the shadow of what happened." I started to protest, but she continued. "Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some wounds take time to heal. But maybe this is your chance to step completely out of that shadow. To go somewhere where no one knows your story unless you choose to tell it." She was right, as usual. Despite all my progress, I was still that woman from the wedding TikTok to most people here. The documentary had only cemented that identity. "What about you?" I asked. "You'd be here alone," she snorted. "I'm 75, not dead. I have friends. I have my garden. I have Mrs. Abernathy next door who keeps me updated on all the TikTok drama." She paused. "And I have video calls. We can talk every week." 2 months later, I was on a plane to Manila, a one-way ticket in my pocket and a 2-year contract with Habitat International in my bag. My apartment was sublet, my few belongings either stored or shipped ahead. The night before I left, I did something I hadn't done in months. I checked the original TikTok videos. They were still there, still accumulating views and comments. But they felt distant now, like watching a movie about someone else's life. On impulse, I recorded a new video, just me, sitting in my empty apartment, speaking directly to the camera. 2 years ago, I thought I knew exactly how my life would go, I said. I had it all planned out. Then in one moment, everything changed. I paused, considering my next words carefully. Many of you have followed my story since that day at the church. You've watched me struggle, rebuild, find my footing again. Your support has meant more than I can say. Another pause. Tomorrow I'm leaving for a new job in the Philippines. A new chapter that has nothing to do with weddings or betrayal or viral videos. Just me, doing work I believe in a place where no one knows my story. I smiled into the camera. So this is goodbye, in a way. Not to life or to love or to possibility. But to defining myself by what happened to me rather than by what I choose to do next. I ended the recording, watched it once, then posted it with a simple caption, Epilogue. Thank you for being part of my story. Then I turned off notifications, put my phone away, and finished packing for my new life. At the airport the next morning, I was waiting at my gate when my phone buzzed with a text. My grandmother, "Someone's at the door for you. Says it's important. Should I send them away?" I frowned. Who would come looking for me now, when my flight was less than an hour from boarding? Who is it? I texted back. 3 dots appeared, then Marco. The camera guy. Marco? I hadn't spoken to him since the documentary wrapped 6 months ago. It's fine, I replied. Tell him I'm at the airport but he can call me. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Ellie, Marco said when I answered. You're really leaving? My flight board's in 40 minutes, I confirmed. What's going on? I saw your TikTok last night. The goodbye one. He sounded breathless, like he'd been running. I wanted to talk to you before you left. About what? He hesitated. About us. Us? There was no us. Marco had been my videographer, then briefly a friend during the documentary process. But we'd never been an us. I don't understand, I said. Neither do I, exactly, he admitted. But I've been thinking about you. A lot. And when I saw that video saying you were leaving. Marco, I interrupted gently. I appreciate you coming to say goodbye, but, no, he cut in. That's not why I came. I came to ask you not to go. Or at least, not to go without considering the possibility of something between us. I was speechless. This made no sense. We'd spent time together, yes, during filming. We'd had coffee a few times. But there had been no hint of romantic interest, no flirtation, no indication that he saw me as anything other than the subject of his camera lens. I know this seems sudden, he continued into my silence. But it's not, for me. I've watched you rebuild your life, Ellie. I've seen your strength, your resilience. I've admired you from the first day, when you nodded to me in that church to keep filming while your world fell apart. My boarding group was called. Passengers around me began gathering their things. Marco, I'm about to get on a plane, I said. This is not great timing. He laughed, a nervous sound. I know. I'm sorry. I'm usually better at this. Better at what? Telling someone how I feel, he said simply. Asking for a chance. Another boarding announcement. Final call for my group. I have to go, I said. I know. He paused. But Ellie, will you think about it? About us? I'm not asking you not to go to the Philippines. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility of something. When you come back. Or maybe even before. I looked around at the airport gate, at the line of passengers disappearing down the jetway, at my carry-on bag packed for a new life on the other side of the world. 2 years ago, I'd been certain about my future. I'd had every detail planned. And then in one moment, everything had changed. Since then, I'd learned to be wary of certainty. To value honesty over appearances. To trust my instincts rather than other people's expectations. And right now, my instincts were telling me something unexpected, that this conversation mattered. That Marco, quiet, loyal Marco who had simply done the right thing when everyone else was doing the wrong thing, might matter too. I'm getting on this plane, I said finally. I'm going to Manila. I'm going to do this job. I understand, he said, disappointment evident in his voice. But, I continued, I'll call you when I land. And we can talk. About possibilities. I could almost hear his smile through the phone. I'd like that. Me too, I realized. And I meant it. As I boarded the plane and found my seat, I thought about the path that had led me here. About standing in that church in my wedding dress, reading those terrible texts. About the viral videos and the documentary and all that had followed. None of it was what I had planned. All of it had been painful, humiliating, difficult. And yet, as the plane lifted off, carrying me toward a future I'd never imagined, I couldn't help but feel something unexpected, gratitude. Not for the betrayal itself. Never that. But for what had come after. For the strength I'd found. The clarity. The freedom to rebuild my life on my own terms. As we rose above the clouds, I watched my old life recede below me. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, it might never completely vanish. But it had transformed into something else, wisdom, perhaps. Or resilience. Or simply the knowledge that I could survive the unimaginable and emerge, not unchanged, but unbroken. My phone buzzed with a final text before I had to switch to airplane mode. My grandmother, safe travels, Ellie. Remember, the best stories never follow the path we expect. I smiled, turned off my phone, and looked out the window at the endless horizon ahead.